Center field. Harris is on the run. Harris at the track. He leaps and he makes the catch. Harper might be doubled up. The throw gets away. The throw to first. It's over. It's over.
Well, that was the ending of, in my opinion, the best game of the night last night between the Braves as they win it against the Phillies. Welcome everyone into BK and Ferrario alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. And that play last night, both Tanner and I texted immediately. Well, now you know the importance of center field because Michael Harris makes that lunging catch at the wall, which more than likely was going to bounce off of it and score Bryce Harper to tie the game up and put the runner at least at second base, maybe third, depending if the bounce went their way. But instead, you get a Gold Glove-esque play by Michael Harris in center field to not only snag that ball off the wall, but then still throw out Bryce Harper to end the game. And Tanner, we're seeing the importance of certain areas in the postseason for baseball like we typically do, which as Cardinals fans, when we're not in the postseason, it perks your ears up, right? The elite starting pitching, when you see Zach Wheeler go out and deal, a bullpen that shuts things down, the Diamondbacks' elite offense and their base running skills. But that one last night with Michael Harris making the play in center field, boy, that one piqued my fancy in terms of Tommy Edman making that play?
I think so. Now, doubling him off, I don't know. I think he makes a catch.
You think he makes a catch at the wall?
I think he makes a catch because I think he's the best route runner out in the outfield.
Okay.
But I like the doubling off part,
which is very important because it's still 2 outs and another bat coming up.
I don't think he doubles off or Harper at going back to first base. I do think he makes the catch, but I don't think he doubles him off. I'm not sure Nootbaar makes the catch. I know Carlson doesn't make the catch.
Walker makes the catch.
No.
What?
He's not going to be in center.
What?
But to your point on that as a reminder of, hey, outfield defense is extremely important for these playoff teams. Yeah, that catch last night emulated, and you're 100% right. That was one of the best finishes we've had in a postseason game in some time.
Yeah.
That was an incredible
Not just this
ending.
season.
And you're getting, as we talked about last week, the best rivalry in baseball currently. You get the Braves that come back with a 2-run homer from one of their star corner infielders in Austin Riley to take the lead, and then you get that play to end it. Just chef's kiss. But yeah, I think this is why, the Cardinals, when you look at what they're going to do in center field, where they're going to have conversations about, okay, who is our guy internally? If we're not going to go out and sign somebody, which I don't expect them to, they've got too many things to do on their shopping list this offseason.
Yep.
Adding a center fielder is way down there, and that's
but remember what Michael Gersh said. Well, I actually don't think we have that much to do on our checklist.
That's true. That's true. He was wrong, but it's okay. It's okay. But I think that's why they've got to pick a horse and back it, and I think they're probably going to back Tommy Edman this year in center because they need to figure out who's the guy that is going to make not so much double off on that play, who's the guy that can make that game-saving type catch. And I think you saw multiple times this year, and this isn't to take a shot at Nootbaar. I think Nootbaar's a good center fielder. I think he's better in a corner. There were times this year when Edman was in center field, and you saw him running to the wall, making a catch like that, leaping up, grabbing it right around that center field wall. Though I do have serious concerns about his arm out in center field and in the outfield, I can't deny he's one of the best route runners I've seen out there when it comes to closing down the gap and getting a fly ball like that in yesterday's game. So I think when I saw that play happen, I went, okay, one, reminder of just how good defense or how much defense really matters in the playoffs. And two, I said, okay, who's the guy that makes that catch in center field, the position that's in question going in this offseason? I think it's probably Tommy Edman that makes that play.
But then the backup question with that is, what does the team look like after this offseason in terms of making the trades? We've talked a lot about how you're going to acquire this pitcher if you're going that route, if you're not spending the money on the offseason. And if Brendan Donovan's a part of the deal, if Nolan Gorman's a part of the deal, Tommy Edman's role changes. Or at least you're going into the offseason with now another task to accomplish of bringing somebody in, which is why I go back to the free agent market in terms of the center field. It would be nice to have a guy like Harrison Bader again for this team, who I know is a free agent, but availability is the most important thing. Kevin Kiermaier might be one of those options for you. My only concern with Tommy Edman in that role is, can you rely on it for 162 games? And that's where I just don't know, especially with this revolving door of uncertainty of, is this guy going to play in the center field spot? Or can he be the second baseman? Or even Derek Gould brought up the potential of there's a battle at shortstop still. There's there's still a lot of what ifs, and I feel like, at least after watching that game last night, you're going to have to lock down right up the middle for this team if you're going to have success next year.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Now, we'll see what improvements Contreras makes because he belongs in that up-the-middle conversation. But I think your up-the-middle defense will be really good. Wynn will make up for any pitfalls that you have in Nolan Gorman. And honestly, I think Gorman's a good defender at second base, and I think they've got maybe arguably the best arms up the middle in baseball. I mean, Gorman, with former third baseman, he's got a cannon of an arm, not as big a cannon as Mason Wynn, who can throw 100 miles an hour. And then it just comes down to center field. And I know BK had brought up this conversation before of, do they have to be good or great up the middle defensively? I don't know if you necessarily have to, but you definitely need to be slightly above average probably in center field. And I think the guy that is best to do that going into this offseason is, I think they're going to have to settle on Tommy Edman as probably their center fielder. Now, to your point of, can you rely on him for 162 games? I don't know if he's going to be a 162-game center fielder. I think he will bounce around. He will play some infield. They will put Newt Barr in center, or they will put Carlson in center field for a handful of games. But I think the best defensive alignment for them next year probably includes Tommy Edman as their opening day center fielder.
I hope that's the case in terms of just locking it down and knowing where guys are going to be at, because it does lessen that load. But it's not just the center field. I mean, look, the third baseman had to make that play on the cutoff man last night, too. And the defense is going to be just as massive next year for this team as it's going to be pitching, because the league is a copycat league. And what we're seeing right now is defense and pitching are winning you baseball games. At least we saw last night with that Atlanta Braves victory.
You say that, and I think it's a great point in terms of a copycat league. I think it's become evidently clear what you need to have to win in the playoffs.
A 1-2 punch.
Yep. And an offense that'll slug.
And great defense that's going to win.
Great defense, too.
Yeah, but offense that'll slug, because Philadelphia, once again, is reminding everybody, and you said this earlier, and we're going to get into this a little bit later in terms of who the Cardinals can kind of imitate going into next season. But here's the issue there. I still don't know about this offense in terms of those big plays in the postseason. Like last night, watching Travis d'Arnaud step up and smash that home run to take the lead. Who's that guy on this Cardinals team? Because we haven't seen it, at least in the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with it because we haven't seen it. I guess my only pushback would be it's a small sample, but I understand the argument because there's no denying they haven't shown up when it's been needed.
Just knew Philly and Atlanta were going to make that interesting. You
knew last night that Austin Riley could do something special when it came to the plate. Now, when they were down, what was it, 4-0 at one point, I texted the group and said they're screwed. But when the offense woke up, I mean, there's no denying it. They can slug. They can make up for anything. I found this interesting, and these are kind of the numbers you start to see as we get into the postseason. These are from Sarah Langs on Twitter. 45.8% of runs have been scored via the home run this October. Wow. And teams to out-homer opponents are 9-1. It's all about slug. And to the point of saying it's a copycat league, there is some truth to that. And I think the formula you're seeing so far here in October as hey, how are these teams having success? Well, they've got a great 1-2 punch. Phillies, it's Wheeler and Nola. And I know Wheeler, they didn't win yesterday with Wheeler on the mound. He pitched really well. I mean, he had a no-hitter through, 6 innings at one point. So, he was fantastic. You look at the Arizona Diamondbacks, Merrill Kelly, Zach Gallen. Gallen was great again last night. Why are the teams like the Dodgers struggling? They don't have a 1-2 punch. They're dealing with injuries. Kershaw is throwing away no velocity, and they're relying on a rookie and Bobby Miller to be out there to pitch game 2. They just don't have the pitching. And then these teams are just slugging. I mean, you mentioned Braves are hitting home runs. You've got the Phillies that are hitting home runs. The team that's surprisingly not hitting home runs is the Diamondbacks, but they kill it on the base paths. Exactly. They're essentially creating an extra base hit off of a single. They take the single, then what do? They take second base. And we said you got to be elite at something, and what's Arizona elite at? Pitching and base running. Yep. And that's where it comes from. Speaking of the Dodgers, and I guess the formula to copycat, what do we take away from this Dodgers team that wins 100 games that is on the verge of being swept by the Arizona Diamondbacks? Because watching them, at least through these 2 games, what did you say earlier, Grant? It's like a 40 ERA for their 2 starting pitchers so far in the playoffs.
Dodgers ERA in 2 games this series, 40.5 ERA.
So here's my thought process with it, and tell me if I'm crazy, which is a lot of the time. Watching the Dodgers has to be the worst fear for Cardinals fans because it's what they want. You want a 100-win team. You want a team that's supposed to be great in every area, but the Dodgers are living right now what it felt like the Cardinals were trying to do over the last couple of seasons in terms of two elite bats are going to carry us through the postseason. Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts, Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt. And now we're witnessing that those elite bats don't matter if your pitching can't suffice through the regular season and the postseason.
Yeah, I think it's twofold for me for really both the Dodgers and the Baltimore Orioles, who could be swept tonight, too. And
I forgot about them. I thought they were already out.
Well, they're probably going to be out tonight, so your thought process was probably fair.
Okay, good.
Those were two 100-win teams and two top seeds that earned buys. I think I don't want to take away anything from either team in the regular season, but they were both flawed coming into the postseason. Like, I see all the writing of, oh my gosh, how is Arizona doing this? This is amazing.
Yeah, that's not the case.
No, I'm not all that impressed. I'm not shocked at all. The Dodgers, to your point, they rely on two guys in their lineup. And though J.D. Martinez, David Peralta had really good years, Outman had a good year, really the two big bats that are going to carry them are Betts and Freeman. For the Baltimore Orioles and the Dodgers, though, their biggest issue, I'm not even looking at their offense, because I think it is somewhat true to that point that you said. It's their pitching. They had no pitching coming into October. I just mentioned Kershaw and his 88-mile-an-hour fastball, and he can't pitch in October when he's healthy, and they're relying on a rookie in Miller. And then you look at Baltimore, and they didn't get enough pitching at the deadline, and that was the biggest criticism we had of them at the deadline.
Yep.
They didn't add enough pitching. The Dodgers didn't add enough pitching. The Dodgers have to rely on Lance Lynn, it looks like, in Game 3. Good luck.
I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but not great.
It's not the worst thing in the world, but yeah, it's not ideal. So I think the thing that I would circle, and I think it's fair to circle their offense too, is the pitching. They just had no pitching coming into this. You could have a good bullpen, but if you have to rely on your bullpen where your starter Kershaw goes a third of an inning in Game 1, and then you got Miller that goes an inning in 2/3 in Game 2, you're not going to win. You're not going to win most playoff series.
We got Rangers and Orioles tonight on 101 ESPN. Yeah, the sweep might be intact. Pregame starting at 6:30, so you can hear all that action right here on 101 ESPN. He's Tanner Hendrickson. Grant Francis in the studio with us today, filling in. BK is out. I'm Alex Ferrario. As always, our Air Comfort Service text line is 314-399-9646. And we are live up at YouTube. Our studio cams are presented by the Air Alliance team. It's at 101 ESPN STL. Jeremy Rutherford joining us in about 15. We've got questions and answers at the bottom of the hour. But coming up next, the Week 5 is now officially done after the Raiders game last night against the Packers. We'll get to some more NFL quick hitters next here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN as we dive into some quick hitters. Boys, the Raiders picked up a big victory last night. Look at them. Here they come, T-Bone. Take down the Green Bay Packers, the team that BK thought that we're going to be great and everybody's sleeping on Jordan Love. How Jordan Love looked last night?
Well,
that pick looked good in the end zone to Christian Watson. That should have been a touchdown.
He's going through it right now.
Yeah, the Packers are going through it right now because they don't have a offense that is going to be able to sustain. But the Raiders did move to 2-3. Here's my question. Can they make the playoffs? Because we've talked about how the AFC is top-heavy in terms of the Dolphins, the Chiefs, the Bills, and then after that, it's wide open after those top three teams. You now get a team that's 2-3, and the Raiders. I thought T-Bone was going to do it again.
Oh, that was pitiful.
It
I
was.
should have.
Well, my voice is not 100% back, so I got to take it easy here. Their next 5 games are as followed. Home against the Patriots. That's an ish show. On the road against the Bears. Not sure. On the road against Detroit. Loss. Home against the Giants. Home against the Jets. If you look at those 5 games, we're talking about maybe 3, 4 if you're going to get optimistic. I mean, you're talking 6-4 at the end of that stretch. That seems at least like one of those cusp teams in the playoffs, right?
Yeah, I think they could be a playoff team, but I say that like if they get in, they'll be, what was it, 2 years ago, or maybe it was last year, where like the Steelers got in with Big Ben, and it was
it was last year where they got in with Kenny Pickett, and I'm like, why are they even in the playoffs?
And they like limped in. It was like, this just put them out of their misery. They're going to get creamed in the playoffs. That's what I view as the Raiders. To where, like, I look at them, and sure, they've got Devontae Adams at wide receiver, and they got Josh Jacobs at running back, but, like, they're just, I don't know, they don't scream like, hey, we should be in the playoffs. It feels more like, because their schedule's so easy, as you just read off, I think they could win 4 of those 5 games and be 6-4, as you said, and then you're clearly in the playoff picture, because I think there are only a handful of locks right now. I think we can agree the Chiefs are going to win the West. I think the Jags win the South. I think you're going to see Cincinnati win the North, and then Miami's going to win the East. And then you've got Buffalo, I think's a playoff team, and that's about it. Everybody else is kind of in that fringe range. And if the Raiders schedule is easy in this stretch, build a little bit of momentum, yeah, I could see where they can kind of sneak their way into the playoff picture.
I'm not really on board with the Raiders. They're so systemically mid. Like, they are the definition of average.
What a way to do an insult. You are so systemically mid. I'm
going to start using that more often.
You need to say that. You're systemically mid, bro.
It's true, though. Like, you mentioned it. Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs is good. Other than that, they're so average. Like, their offensive line isn't that good.
I like their defensive front. Yeah. With Max Crosby, I heard somebody talk about this. I think it was on First or Get Up. It sucks that Max Crosby is on the Raiders, because Max Crosby should be on a playoff team and dominate in the postseason. I mean, he runs that defense himself.
Yeah.
That's the only thing they're good at, though.
But if you look at the potential wild card teams, you mentioned the teams that you feel are going to win the division, Tanner. You talk about the teams that are right behind those teams in the divisions. The Raiders don't stack up against any of those teams. I put the Raiders and the Steelers sort of in the same category, and I even think the Steelers are a better team than the Raiders.
So let's go to the other side of that game last night, the Packers. We joked about it a little bit, but at the beginning of the season, we talked about how the Packers are a team that could be slept on. They do have Aaron Jones still. Jordan Love has been in the system, so he knows what's going on. After that game last night, where it's back-to-back games that he's been underwhelming, what do you make of Jordan Love?
To be honest, I really don't know what to make of Jordan Love, because...
Do you love him?
No.
Me neither.
It's more we're in the friend zone, you know? Because, like, early on, I mean, you mentioned it, he went in his first 3 games at the Bears, at the Falcons versus the Saints. He had 7 touchdowns and 1 pick. Last 2 versus Detroit, short week, though, against the Detroit Lions, and at the Las Vegas Raiders, 1 touchdown, 5 interceptions. Yeah. So I really don't know what to make of these massive swings from Jordan Love and this Green Bay Packers team. I think they're like a 500 football team. I think they're going to be right around that range. They may finish 8-9 or 9-8. Don't know if they're a playoff team, but the NFC's so weak that they could sneak their way in. I don't have a good sense on what Jordan Love is just yet.
I honestly think the Packers are the version of the Raiders in the NFC. Like, that's how that feels. Last night watching that game.
Not good for them in the game that they just played.
No, not at all. But that game was close, and I felt during that game that it really could have gone back and forth either way because the teams were so similar. So, I mean, the only difference for the Packers is that they're in a conference that is much less competitive than the Raiders are. So they've got a better chance. But I'm sort of on the same feeling with Jordan Love. And it's early for him. So to be fair to Jordan Love, I don't know if he's gotten a fair, time span of an opportunity to really judge him. But so far, it's not looking great.
And that's where I'm at, too. I joke about it, but, I mean, it's a lot more competent than some other teams with their quarterback, and it is the first season that he is the starter. I mean, what has he gotten, a few snaps every season for the last 4 years that he's been in the system? He's got an arm, which is a good thing. Doesn't really have the weapons to throw to, although I think Jalen Reed has been good this season. Romeo Doubs has been good. Christian Watson is good, but he's been unhealthy. Their offensive line's the problem. I mean, the dude is under pressure every single time he drops back. The problem for them is they're not going to be a playoff team this year because the NFC is so wide open beyond those top two teams that you're going to be fighting with teams like the Seahawks, the Rams, the Vikings, although I think the Vikings might be done. We'll get to them in a minute. The Falcons, the Saints. Those are the teams you're fighting for a wild card spot with, and I don't know if you can outperform against those teams. So I'm going to give you two quarterback names right now. Tell me which one you think should be benched going into Week 6. Mac Jones or Bryce Young? And I bring both of them up because Bryce Young, of course, has not looked good at all for the Carolina Panthers. And Mac Jones had an abysmal week. And somebody asked Bill O'Brien that yesterday, do you expect Mac Jones to start on Sunday? Now, Bill O'Brien did the offensive coordinator thing and said, yeah, of course, he's our quarterback. But out of those two, who benefits more from sitting him?
So I don't think the Panthers should bench Bryce Young yet. I know he's been abysmal, and I saw this stat yesterday. The Panthers have given up 45 points off of turnovers this season. 31 of those have come directly off of a Bryce Young turnover. But you can't bench the number one pick right away. You can't. You just can't.
Yeah.
Even if he has been bad, and he has been bad. Trust me, I'm losing faith in him after every start to be the franchise guy. You can't do it this year. I don't even think you can really do it next year. I don't think they gain anything by the Patriots benching Mac Jones, but I wouldn't be shocked if they did it. I mean, they've got to try something. I mean, they've been obliterated the last two games. They've put up 3 total points in their last 2 and just 18 in the last 3. So they've got to do something different. If they decided and the announcement was made, hey, Mac Jones is not going to be starting this week, it'll be Bailey Zappi, I would get it. And I don't think Mac Jones has a future in New England. I don't think any of that coaching staff has a future in New England. So that one I don't have a big issue with if they decided to do it.
Honestly, I'm at the point where if I'm the Patriots and I'm thinking from the Robert Kraft mindset that if Bill Belichick's not going to be here after this season, if I'm going to have a new head coach, do I really want to put some young blood in terms of Zappi that comes in and actually adds a spark? Because frankly, I might be looking for Caleb Williams in this spot, right?
Do you think he's going to add a spark?
I think anytime you bring in somebody like that, you're going to get one good game, and then does the team jump off? I mean, Zappi was at least decent for them last year.
Yeah, but this team is so bad.
Does it hurt your team more if you play Zappi in terms of going after a top pick?
No, in fact, I think it might make your chances a little better.
I think
Mac Jones is awful.
I don't think Zappi would add a spark, but he might add a zap to the team.
You spent way too much time around me, and God, I love it.
See,
you're rubbing off on me.
Sad part is I kind of thought the same thing.
See?
And I was waiting for Ferrario to say it, so I'm disappointed, Grant.
The universal dad jokes are always a win for everybody. Speaking of dad jokes, Cher's got plenty of them in his backpack. We'll get to him. He's going to join us, the Athletic Blues Insider, to preview Thursday night's season opener against the Dallas Stars. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. JR's next on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario with you. Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my dentist, 100 West Dental. And I'm here to talk about the dentist because, look, everybody's got anxiety going through it. Guys, a lot of the time I've heard be like, I don't want to go to the dentist. I think I'll be fine. I brush my teeth every once in a while. Here's the thing. It's not about just your teeth. It's making sure that everything is intact. And that's what 100 West Dental prides themselves in. The preventative procedure that is going to have the long-term effect on your mouth, on your overall health. And I can speak to this because I didn't have the right dentist, was going to him nonstop, repeatedly every 6 months, and then I find out that he wasn't doing his due diligence, found out that I had a tumor, lost 7 teeth, a nightmare. Don't have that nightmare. Go to 100 West Dental. They have the most modern technology. Patient experience is front of mind, and it's a very specific approach to dentistry. What I love about it is the doctor, the nurses, all of them, they're there to help you through everything, answer all the questions. They've got website scheduling, and you can even do an online consultation with the doctor before you go to the dentist. So check them out. They're off of Manchester, 100westdental.com, or call them at 636-585-0100.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, Monday Night Football, the Raiders victorious 17-13 over the Green Bay Packers. Both teams now 2-3 on the season. And last night as well, the MLB playoffs, Atlanta takes down Philadelphia 5-4 to even that series at 1 game apiece. The Diamondbacks up 2-0 now on the Dodgers as they win 4-2. And then tonight, the playoffs will continue. Houston will be in Minnesota to take on the Twins in that tied series at 1 game apiece. And then Baltimore and Texas, with Texas up 2-0 in that series. You can hear that game right here on 101 ESPN. Pregame will start at 6:30. And also tonight, of course, the NHL regular season starts. Nashville will be in Tampa Bay to take on the Lightning, Blackhawks, and Penguins. And then the defending Stanley Cup champions, the Vegas Golden Knights, host the Seattle Kraken. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff. Find new roads and shop 24/7 at londoff.com and londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario as we head to our 101 ESPN hotline and welcome in our Blues insider for The Athletic. He is Jeremy Rutherford, just as hyped for the start of hockey season as I know we are. JR, are you ready for Bedardamania to start tonight?
Yeah, I'm ready for the league to start and excited to talk about some Blues hockey. I know we're going to go here in the next couple of weeks. We're going to go from a situation where we're saying that the Blues defense needs to be better, and we're going to be able to say it is better or it isn't better. Finally, we'll be able to see some hockey and make those determinations. But, guys, hey, listen, if I tell any dad jokes along the way here, please don't zap me.
God, see, this is why I love JR. This is why we have him on.
Let's hang up.
He was ready for it. He was ready for it. So, JR, I'm glad you mentioned that defense and us finally being able to say, you know, it's better than what we thought or it's not better. At what point do you think we can make that decision? Because I said this to Grant after postgame this past Saturday with Chicago. Like, I feel like that Edmonton Oilers 3-0 shutout last season kind of broke me in terms of I don't know at what point I'm actually going to believe what I'm seeing on the ice.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a little bit. I don't think you can make that determination, come to that conclusion after 2 weeks. I think you're looking at a minimum of a month of the defense playing pretty solid hockey, and that's not saying that they got to shut out everybody or have a 1.2 goals against through the first 3 weeks of the season. But I think once you get to a month, once you see kind of the X's and O's, the strategy taking shape, guys are buying in, and that's the biggest thing. Craig Berube said it at the end of last year. It's just not the system. It's guys going out there and wanting to play for each other, wanting to go in the corner for each, wanting to block a shot, those types of things. I don't think you can say after 2 weeks of the season, okay, they're there now. I think it's going to take at least a month.
JR, how important is it for the Blues to get off to a fast start to the beginning of this season?
Yeah, you know, that question I think was asked of Craig Berube yesterday, and it's an obvious question. It's an obvious answer, but it's very important, I think, with this team and the situation that it's in, Tanner. I think that what happened last year, nobody saw coming, at least few people saw coming, and they're trying to look at this like a retool where you're trying to stay competitive, but you're also trying to build for the future. That's what they've done with those 3 first-round picks. They've got some good prospects. Finally, the cupboard looks pretty good for the next couple of years. But at the same time, which Doug Armstrong's always done, is he wants to be competitive. And I think for this team to get out to a 2-6 start, 2-8 start, then you get into the here we go again. And, you know, now it's not a retool. Now it's a rebuild. I really do think that the situation that the Blues are in, they need a good start.
Well, JR, you mentioned staying competitive and also trying to develop some players, and there's a lot of questions going into the year. One of those that I find just so fascinating is Scott Perunovich. How do you think they're going to handle him? Because it looks like right now he's going to start the season for the first game in the press box.
Yeah, I really thought that if Scott Perunovich made this roster, and of course needing to go through waivers, that looked like it would be the case, that the Blues were going to have to play him. I honestly didn't see a situation where he would make the team and be a healthy scratch. And that's the way it looks going into Thursday's opener against Dallas. It looks like Scandella on the left side and Tucker on the right side in that third pair. So it looks like Scott Perunovich is going to start in the press box. And I think the situation is going to be an interesting one moving forward because you're going to need him out there. And the big question, can you have Torrey Krug and Scott Perunovich in the lineup at the same time? You know, it looks like that's what the Blues are facing. And for now, they've made that determination that they can't. I don't think it's strictly that, though. I think it's Scott Perunovich's 5-on-5 defense needs to be up to par. It was okay during the regular season. It can be a lot better. And I think some NHL practices, being up here with the Blues, getting in some games, seeing that 5-on-5 defense improve, maybe he can work himself into the lineup, even if it's with Torrey Krug in there. So that's definitely a storyline to follow.
We're talking with Jeremy Rutherford, our Blues insider for The Athletic. As always, you can follow JR on Twitter at JP Rutherford. You can also check out his work on The Athletic. Subscribe. Just dropped a piece with the bold predictions for the upcoming season. JR, you mentioned this retool that they're in, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later on in the show. But if this season ends the way that last season did, are they still in a rebuild, or are they still in a retool, or does it become a rebuild?
No, I think that's definitely a rebuild. And I think, 2, 3 months, 4 months into that type of season where we're looking at the same stuff we looked at last year, I mean, it's going to be colossal. It really is, because you're going to have the same issues that you had last offseason when you tried to rectify some of the things, and that's moving these guys, these defensemen with long-term contracts with no trade clauses. And maybe at that point, these guys would be more apt to accept a trade somewhere else. Maybe if it's not going to work out here, a Torrey Krug or a Nick Leddy would waive. But I guess the question at that point is, who out there around the league wants them? Because now you're looking at a 2-season span where these guys aren't playing up to par. And you're definitely going to have to give up some ante to be able to move those contracts. So, I think that, Alex, gosh, if you're talking about a similar situation to last year, now you're really focusing on the future. Now you're looking at the Dvorskys and the Snuggeruds and some of these guys to come in here. And I don't think you're going to be able to rely on these veterans like Doug Armstrong was hoping would bounce back this year.
Does that benefit this team in the long run, though, JR, if they just kind of come to the realization that, hey, this is a rebuild and it's not going to be as quick as we thought? Or does that hurt the franchise?
Some people are going to disagree with me here, but I say that it hurts because I think that if you can bounce back and you can get some decent play out of some of these veterans, then potentially, even though you're going to still be in that retool, you can move those guys and you can start to integrate some of those younger players. I think if you have a similar situation to last year, yeah, you're going to get a top 10 pick. Great. But, that guy's not going to be able to help you for 2, 3, 4 years. And in the meantime, what's this franchise look like and how long are some of these veterans going to have to stay in the fold because you just can't move them and you're going to continue to have to pay them and potentially play them. So to me, that's a negative if it goes that route again.
JR, one area where the Blues are going to have to improve this year is on both special teams, power play and penalty kill. I saw in your piece earlier this week that the numbers were improved in the preseason. Is that something or nothing? It's tough to read into just a small sample in the preseason, but it did look like, based on the numbers, the power play and penalty kill had improved.
Yeah, I think, and I put the numbers in there, pretty good. They were on the power play and the penalty kill in the preseason, but small sample size, too tough to read, just 8 preseason games. But I will say this, watching practice, watching some of those games, they move the puck well, and they've got guys in spots who I think can perform. Last year we went in looking at that power play, and a guy like Jordan Kyrou in that David Perron spot had a tough time getting the shot off, and you missed that David Perron shot. So they tried to look elsewhere for opportunities to score. Now you've got a distinguished top group and a distinguished bottom group. You can tell the difference between the two units, but, talent on both units. You look at Jacob Vrana, he's on that second unit now, and he's on that opposite side on the flank, on that right side, and he's ripping shots on the power play. I really do think that his one-timer is going to be an asset for that second unit. And then with the PK, look, it can only go up from last year. You get the new coach in there, Mike Weber, the assistant coach, and I just think they're going to be more aggressive. They're going to be working for each other. I think the PK should be better, but again, too premature. We got to see what happens here in the regular season.
Jared, final one from me. How much of this season is going to rely on Kyrou, Thomas, and Buchnevich being the best players?
Yeah, a lot, especially with Thomas and Kyrou. Those contracts, as we know, jump up to $8.125 for both of those guys. You don't have O'Reilly, you don't have Tarasenko, but in the same breath, Buchnevich is important too, and he could be the MVP of this team. The thing with Buchnevich is he certainly needs to be healthy, but let's just hypothetically say that line catches fire and Thomas and Kyrou uphold their end of the bargain in terms of playing well, performing well with those contracts. You still need so much more for this team to be a playoff team. I don't think that line can be the best line in hockey and you make the playoffs. It's going to take a lot from that secondary scoring, the defense, and Jordan Binnington proven to people like me that he did play well last year, but can he play better if the defense in front of him is better? There's still a lot of question marks. The special teams is another one we just talked about. So that would be great if that line could play hot all season, but it's going to take a lot more.
Can't wait for this one to get underway. Thursday night, it starts 7 o'clock puck drop. I've got the first community pregame show with Joe Vitale starting at 6. And, of course, keep it locked to Jeremy Rutherford all season long with his coverage at JP Rutherford on Twitter. And, of course, subscribe to The Athletic. JR, always appreciate the time, my man. We'll talk next Tuesday when we get this thing going 2 games in.
All right, sounds good, guys. Thanks a lot.
There you go. Jeremy Rutherford with us. And I think what he said there at the end, T-Bone, is I got pushback yesterday when I said it to you and BK that if the season goes opposite of the direction I expect it to, it falls into you look at it as they made the wrong decision with Thomas and Kyrou. And I know people push back and say, well, it's not just them. What if they play well and the defense struggles or Binnington struggles? I get it. It's going to fall on those guys too. But because they've got those contracts, because they made the decision to move on from Ryan O'Reilly and David Perron because they saw the future with these two guys, I know it sucks to put it on a 23 and 24-year-old, but that's what the Blues are doing right now. And if you don't take that step further, if you're drafting in the top 10 again, then it was a failure and you made the wrong bets.
Yeah, I think there's a lot you can learn from the Blues if they are in the top 10 pick again. And though I'm skeptical of them being a playoff team, I don't think they're going to be one of the top 10 worst teams. I think they're a fringe playoff team. But to your point, you're going to learn a lot if they end up being in the lottery again, if they have a top 10 pick, because you're going to learn, did you bet right on Kyrou Thomas? You're going to learn, was last year a fluke with the defense? You're going to learn about Vrana and Capnam, and do they have future plans? Were they able to get to the level that we think they can? Vrana, a guy that we think could be a 30, 40 goal scorer. And then also, what do you have in some of these young guys? What is Jake Neighbors? What is Scott Perunovich? What is Tyler Tucker? They're going to get a lot of their answers. Cam Binnington play well if the defense was good in front of them. They're going to get a lot of answers this season. This is I view this year as kind of the defining year in this retool, because either things go right and you're a playoff team, or maybe you just missed the playoffs, but you saw a lot of positive steps like Thomas and Kyrou taking the right step, the defense showing it was a one-off last year, or this thing just goes so south that it goes from being a retool to a rebuild. This is, I know it's only year one of a retool, year and a half, I should say, since they kind of started this retool at the deadline last year. This is the defining year for the St. Louis Blues franchise. And if this is a retool or if this is going to become a rebuild.
Every power ranking that I have seen with the season starting today has the Blues 25th in the NHL all the way to 31st in the NHL. So it is about as fascinating of a season as you can ask for. And we'll talk about this a little bit later in the 12 o'clock hour of, one, how the Blues can separate themselves from this middle group, but also how much this top line is relied on if this team is going to have a successful season. So we'll get to that in the 12 o'clock hour. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, we've got questions and answers. You send us your questions, 314-399-9646, Air Comfort Service text line. We'll answer them next on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. It is time for questions and answers alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grand Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. So now's your opportunity. Send us your questions and we'll answer them here on 101 ESPN. Fellas, let's start with this one. Would you rather fight a drunk guy naked or fight a sober guy clothed? I don't.
What? Next question.
Okay, moving on. Thought that one would be great for all of us. All right, next question. Are you guys really in on the Cardinals trading for Tyler Glasnow?
I love the idea of trading for Tyler Glasnow. I understand that it's only a one-year deal, and I don't think, like, if you trade for him, I'm not 100% convinced that you give him a contract extension because he's had trouble staying healthy, but when he's healthy, man, he's got legit stuff. I mean, 12.2 strikeouts per nine in his 21 starts this year. And he had a 3.53 ERA and covered 120 innings. Sign me up for that. And I know it's like, well, he's got to make 30 starts. No, like you've got to, by acquiring Glasnow, you go, okay, we project he's going to make 20. How do we fill the other 12 that we're not going to get from him? That's where you look at a Zach Thompson, or that's where you look at maybe another person in your minor league system. Maybe you believe TK Roby or Gordon Graceffo can fill those other 12. But I love the idea of Glasnow. He's not. I know his salary's at like $25 million. I think Tampa may eat a little bit of that, and I don't think it's going to cost you as much as like trading for a Dylan Cease.
I heard Claves talk about it on the opening drive earlier today, and he's right. Tyler Glasnow is a very interesting player, but Tyler Glasnow is going to give you somewhere between 15 and 20 starts, and you have to be okay with that, and you have to prepare for the worst. But you also have to make sure you're not giving up too much. And Claves is like, look, if you give up a mid-level prospect or something that you're okay with parting with, fine. But he's like, if you're giving up one of your guys that you're relying upon, he's like, I don't know if that juice is worth the squeeze. And that's where I agree with him. I love Tyler Glasnow, but if we're talking Brendan Donovan, Nolan Gorman, it can't do it.
I would be shocked if he costs that much just because it is a one-year deal. It is $25 million. But I think at some point, and I don't know if he's the guy that you do that for, but at some point the Cardinals can't go, oh, that price. Because
absolutely agree.
You are so desperate for pitching, and you've put yourself in such a bind that at some point you just have to say, you know what? Maybe we extend ourselves on this trade. I'm not saying like, you know what? Yeah, let's just trade Walker for a mediocre pitcher.
This is the season to get uncomfortable.
Exactly.
And this is the season when you look at a Nolan Gorman and look at a Brendan Donovan and say, we love these guys. But is the player we're getting in return better than what we have on our roster right now? And that's where you have to pull the trigger. That's what most of these teams in the postseason have accomplished at some point or another. Minnesota did not want to move on from Luis Arise, but they knew what they were getting was going to benefit them in the long run, and it has. From the 314, guys, I'm curious and concerned about Jordan Binnington. If he has another rough year, is he just a goaltender that can only perform with a top 10 defense in front of him?
I would say yes at that point. Like if it's after this season, now we're talking about 3 seasons consecutively where Binnington has struggled. Now, obviously, he had the playoff run in 2022, but that regular season was rough. Last season, you can sort of write off because of the struggles on defense, but if it's another season, then you have 3 seasons in a row, and then you're looking at the flukiness being the cup run in the year after. So you're getting into a sample size that's larger, and the majority of that sample size isn't looking great for Binnington. So if it's another year, yeah, I'm officially concerned at that point.
I think I agree. I think if you see slight improvement defensively, yet you continue to see kind of porous numbers from Jordan Binnington, save percentage not around 900, goals against is still pretty high, then yeah, I think there's serious concern. Now, granted, I think it gets misconstrued in terms of like I say that and you just go, oh, he's not a Binnington supporter. No, I think he's a legitimate playoff goalie. Like if you told me I have Jordan Binnington as my playoff goalie and I don't even get any questions about how I got there in the regular season, sign me up. That guy's proven he can take his game to the next level. But I think there are serious doubts about him at the end of the regular season if his numbers are still low, porous, and the defense improved a little bit.
Let me ask you this question, and I'm asking both of you and the texter. What goaltender is great with a not top 10 defense in the NHL?
Carey Price was that for a long time.
Absolutely would agree with that, but never really justiced anything. And on top of it, he's not here anymore. I'm talking right now in the NHL. Because when you think top 10 goaltenders, who are they? You say Saros, Roman Josi, and you've got a top 10 defense. Vasilevsky, I mean, you've got two of the best defensemen in the game right now. Colorado, I could hear the argument for Colorado, but I don't think they've got a good enough goaltender. The Rangers got a really good defense. The Islanders, really good defense. Yeah. My point with this is Boston's got a great defense. If you're a top 10 goaltender in the NHL, you've got a top 10 defense right there. They're intertwined. And so, yeah, I would be concerned that Binnington's just a guy that performs with defense in front of him. But I would also be concerned because if I get a top 10 defense and don't have a good enough goaltender that I've seen get the job done, well, now I'm going to be searching for that same goaltender. They're tied together. And unfortunately for the Blues, to get your top 10 defense, you have to wait it out. And now you're going to be beyond the prime years.
See, I think statistically they'll be tied together. I'm not 100% sure the eye test will tell you they're tied together because last year the defense was bad by the numbers. Binnington was bad by the numbers, but the eye test said Binnington wasn't that bad. The eye test said he got beat by backdoor tappings.
So here are the shots allowed per game last season among teams. Here's the top 10. You tell me if any of these goaltenders you'd rather have than Jordan Binnington. Anaheim Ducks, John Gibson.
I could see a situation where John Gibson would be good. He's been playing in front of a terrible team.
Maybe. But again, his numbers don't back it up.
But again, that's where the eye test comes in. Where I would say...
But I would argue Binnington looks very similar to how John Gibson looked last season. I mean, he's making desperation saves when he needs to. I don't even know who the hell Columbus Blue Jackets goaltender is. So a Columbus Blue Jackets goaltender.
Well, since we don't know him, I'll take Binnington.
Vejmelka for the Arizona Coyotes. I mean, I could hear the argument because Vejmelka's looked really good. But again, had one of the worst defenses in front of him. The Chicago Blackhawks, again, no idea. Peter Mrazek is their goaltender. No. Montreal's got Jake Allen.
No.
You say Saros.
I love Jake Allen,
you say Saros is an elite goaltender and has a bad defense in terms of shots allowed last season, but they also still have Roman Josi. Buffalo's got nobody last year. This year they might have somebody. And then Pittsburgh. Those were the teams that allowed more shots on goal per game than the Blues last season. I think they're intertwined, but I also would argue I'd rather have a goaltender who's been able to get the job done with a bad defense in front of him than a good defense and a goaltender who hasn't proven he can make those saves.
Yeah, by the way, someone on the text line asked what's Jordan Binnington's playoff record. I looked it up. He is 20-20. That's his record in the playoffs, but I also would say that
remember that awful season.
A lot of his playoff experience, like half of his playoff experience, was in 2020, which was an absolute fluke. And then 2021, and the Montreal Canadiens were in the Stanley Cup final. Yeah. Like, that was a major fluke. It's a weird stat.
It's the hard part of defending Jordan Binnington because when it's coming from people who watch the Blues, it's, well, you're just making excuses. Yeah. And I understand it. Yeah, I understand it, which is why he doesn't have to have a good season. But I always think when I talk about a top goaltender in the NHL, I'm backing that up with, but their defense is great too. And that's where I just don't know the Blues can be there.
And I think some of that is true, but I think there are I think I'm trying to figure the best way to frame this. I think you can still judge Binnington by the end of this year based on not just his numbers, but what you see. Because, sure, maybe the defense is bad, but how many of those momentum goals does he give up? We talk about this, where the Blues need a big save, and he just doesn't make it for them. Whether that is because it's the defense's fault or not, but you need to make that save. That's something that relies. This is like saying, well, I can't judge Mac Jones because he doesn't have weapons around him. The quarterback's only as good as his wide receivers. I think that is a fair retort on both when we're talking about goalies and defense and quarterbacks and wide receivers. At some point, though, I got to see the quarterback show a sign that he is a legitimate player. Same with the goaltender.
See, 2 years ago, I would agree with you. Last year, I felt like he did make those saves. It was the saves that the dude's looking one way and the puck's in the net behind him. Those were the saves that it just felt different. So, but again, this is always a back and forth argument with people that like Binnington and don't like Binnington that will never change until he has a successful season.
And listen, I could see both sides of that argument too. Someone could tell me that they're not a believer in Jordan Binnington anymore, and I would say, your argument is valid.
Yeah.
If you're coming from a statistical standpoint and you're looking at, even the playoff record, 20-20, your argument is valid. I don't agree with the argument. It's the same way with the defense. You don't believe the defense is going to be better this year. I totally understand that. I just don't agree. One
more point I wanted to make, in this texter sent in from the 314. Alex Husso played behind the same bad defense and took the Blues to the playoffs. What would you guys say is a good save percentage for a goaltender? Like in a game?
In a game, I'd say
9-10?
Yeah, 9-15.
Okay. I think we do this in terms of, Husso took care of that. Guys, Husso played 40 games. He started 40 games for the Blues that season where he led them to the playoffs. 20 of his starts were less than 900 save percentage. Like 50% of his starts were sub 900 save percentage.
So I get where you're going with this because that is true.
And he lost his job in the playoffs.
I think there were two things with Husso. Husso made the momentum save. There is no denying that.
Absolutely.
And there is no stat for that, by the way. He made that momentum save in which Binnington did not that year. And then the secondary thing is that team just outscored their problems. That team is the team that I think they're trying to emulate this year of what are we going to do?
Because of their defense.
We're probably not going to be great defensively. And I think 2 years ago, I don't think they overplayed. I heard that be a question last year. Did they overplay expectations 2 years ago? I don't think that was the case. I think the defense was better, but they still had issues, and they were able to outscore them. Yeah, and I think that's what they're going to have to do again this year.
Which is why the season is so intriguing, because 2 years ago it was the same defense as last year, and they were good enough to get you to the playoffs and make a run. And I think they've got just as good of an offense this year with some of these guys. We'll continue the Blues conversation coming up next, because right now the Blues are in this middle tier of teams in the Western Conference. How do they move above that? T-Bone, Grant, and I will discuss next on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario with you, with my favorite person, my insurance agent. She is Tracy Bibb. And Tracy, when it comes to insurance, I saw you put this post out a little bit ago that rates are going all over the place. Why is it important to have that customer service and communication with your insurance rep?
Yeah, absolutely. We are seeing rate changes going across the board. I did put that on my Facebook page, so if anybody's interested, depending on the company that you have, you can go out there and look at some of those that are changing. Absolutely a great time to meet with us at the Bibb Agency to see what we can do about your policy to save you some money if you're with one of those companies, especially if you've been in the situation recently where you've had maybe some hail damage to your roof and now you have to get a new roof. We have great discounts for that regardless of the claim that you might have had to file. And also, on top of that, who is not ready for hockey to start?
Tracy, you are preaching to the choir right now. And if you want to talk hockey on top of insurance, Tracy is your girl. Give her a call today. You'll get a free non-committal quote. It is super simple. Tracy walks you through everything. 314-328-4260. Again, 314-328-4260. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the Bibb. Tracy, thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Go Blues.
Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. It is BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. We are live on our studio cams on YouTube at 101 ESPN STL. It is our Air Alliance team. T-Bone's beautiful mugs just waving at those cameras right now. We got to get that mustache in, my man.
I'm working. I didn't shave.
You didn't shave? Okay,
No.
I see it.
Can you tell?
I see it coming in. That's 1 day of not shaving.
Man.
Grant, start growing a mustache,
And it's
my man.
Friday. I'm going to look like Mario.
Just hey, Rocky called me Mario earlier today. I'm like, come on, man. This is a Western cowboy mustache, not a Mario mustache.
I'd look like I should be in prison if I did that.
I typically look like that, which is why I don't typically do it. But if you want to see my mustache and see our beautiful faces, head on over to our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. So here's where we're at. Right now, the Blues enter the season on Thursday in the middle of the pack in the Western Conference. Makes sense, right? They're not going to be one of the elite teams, and I think a lot of people view them as not a bottom dweller. So you're right in the middle. Now, you can be viewed as the bottom dweller. I told you guys on the fourth period on their power rankings, they had the Blues ranked 29th out of 32. I think that's an absolute joke. But the teams that appear to a lot of analysts ahead of St. Louis in terms of projections and fringe playoff teams are the Winnipeg Jets, who just signed Connor Hellebuck and Mark Scheifele to long-term deals, the Calgary Flames, the Nashville Predators, who somebody explained this to me because their general manager said we're rebuilding, the Canucks, who I've heard so many people say hammer the over 88 points for that team, and the Arizona Coyotes, which a sneaky pick for a lot of teams because of the offense, but not so much in terms of being better than the Blues. The question is, how do the Blues separate themselves from these middle teams? Teams like the Flames, the Jets, the Canucks, the Predators. All of these teams are viewed to have more than 85 points, which is where a couple of people have put the Blues.
Yeah, I think for them to get past this middle ground, this middle grouping of teams, I think what's going to happen is it's a lot of the conversations that we've had, which is, one, the defense has to improve. No, I'm not saying they got to be top 10, but can you get back to like middle of the pack defensively? I think you're going to have to see Binnington have a good year, which is going to be important for them. And I think it's going to come down to that top line. Though I'm pretty high on what Jakub Vrana is going to do for this team, and I like the Kevin Hayes addition, and I actually like Kapanen as well and what Blake could bring to the table. It's going to come down to that top line.
Absolutely.
If that top line takes the steps that are necessary, and Thomas, Kyrou, Buchnevich, those three are the line that can help guide you to the playoffs, and they will be the focal point. They will be that line that if we say, hey, this team's able to get past this middle ground, it's because you got an elite line. You got a line that when you put out there, you go, you know what, I think this group's going to score every time they touch the ice. So those are kind of the things for me, and I would also throw special teams into that conversation. I mean, it sounds like I just gave off like everything's going to go right.
Needs to go
but
right.
Like, let's be honest.
Every
one of those scenarios, though that is everything, every one of those scenarios coming into this year has a major question mark next to it.
See, here's I think people forget that Ryan O'Reilly and David Perron were the top line for that season that the Blues actually made the playoffs. But they weren't like the Kyrou Thomas point producers. They were the guys that could shut down the other line, and then power play David Perron would thrive. And now you are relying on Thomas and Kyrou. And my point is, like, look at the Flames. What do the Flames have to hang their hat on in terms of being a team that's projected to get 94 points? The Jets have Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuck and some really good offensive weapons. I can understand that. The Canucks, you're relying on Thatcher Demko, who's been hurt throughout his career. And the Predators, I guess you're relying on Jussi Saros, but no offense there. So you are right. Everything's got to go right for the Blues to be in this conversation to separate yourselves. But in terms of growth within the organization, that's also a key piece in all of this.
Yeah, and I think for the Blues, they're going to have somebody that surprises too. Like, you're going to have somebody, whether it be Vrana becomes a 40-goal scorer, or it is Sammy Blais, the production you saw in the second half, or when he got acquired, that production is real. Like, you're going to have one surprise from the St. Louis Blues that goes right for them. I don't even know if surprise is the right word, but one of those guys that you probably acquire.
Did you just say 40 goals?
Oh,
yeah.
Jeremy Rivers is on the line.
What's going on?
Did I just hear 40 goals for Jakub Vrana?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Rivs, he's like he's like a goal per play game guy when he's in the lineup.
Yeah, I'm giving out goals like Oprah gives out cars.
It's like Easter eggs from the bunny right now. Just you get an egg, you get an egg.
You get 40 goals, and you get 40 goals.
Our guy Jamie Rivers up on our YouTube channel.
Sammy Blais going to get to 50. Why not?
Jamie, can you explain this to me? Like, Jamie, explain this to me, though. Like, I understand the pessimism from a lot of outsiders with
Heck, they've got them ranked 26, 27 in some of the rankings. I disagree. I think this is a playoff team. I'm watching these guys practice. I'm watching training camp. and it's got a different vibe to it. There's a lot more attention to detail on the defensive side of the puck. There's a lot more effort day in and day out. Braden Shen being the captain, I think it was a good kick in the pants for this group. You're looking at guys like Torrey Krug. You don't think he's got something to prove? I mean, the guy got asked to waive his no-trade clause because they wanted to move him out of here. He said, no, not today. And now he's going to have to go and show everybody why he was signed by Doug Armstrong. Jordan Binnington, don't you think he's sick of hearing about, well, the numbers bear it out that Jordan Binnington's not that. He's sick of hearing about, well, the numbers bear it out that Jordan Binnington's not that good. Don't you think he's sick of hearing that crap?
Hey, you sounded like Dom from The Athletic there, Jamie.
You know what? I've been working on my Dom.
It's really good. It's really good.
Yeah. I figure, I've never met the guy, but I figure that's the way he sounds when he talks. I picture him ordering his pizza that way too. Be like, can I get a small cheese pizza, but please cut the crust off for me? Like that's what I picture my dog.
And please keep pepperoni on one side of the pizza because I can't have it touch the other side of the pizza.
All right, that was just rude.
See,
I get it.
You're getting it. Exactly.
It was mean, but I get it. So this is, and I do understand, because T-Bone just mentioned it before you hopped on with us, Jamie, like everything has to go right for the Blues to be in that spot. Like you need the great goaltending. You do need your defense to take the step forward. And there should be optimism from a lot of Blues fans and looking what they've been doing throughout preseason. But like when I look at all these teams in terms of the middle of the ground, I don't see these teams taking that elite step forward this season. Like Calgary still doesn't know what they're doing with 3 impactful players that are pending free agents. The Jets just made a decision. I think the Jets can now remain in the conversation for the next 3 years before that Hellebuck and Scheifele contracts start to hurt. But the Canucks have been in this middle ground. They've gone through coach to coach, and the Predators GM said, we're rebuilding. So the team that I would look at in terms of taking a massive step out of this middle and start to put themselves in the conversation would be St. Louis.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I think that I just feel like teams are overlooking the roster construction of this team. And, you've got Thomas and Kyrou, who are point-of-game guys. Pavel Buchnevich is a point-of-game guy. Can any of those 3 make the jump into the 95 to 100-point plateau? I mean, time will tell. But what I like about this team is the depth of the roster. You look at the other rosters, and we did this on the Fast Lane. We broke down every team in the Central Division and kind of compared them to the Blues. And when you look at the depth, the only 2 teams that have the depth that rival on paper are Colorado and Dallas. Yep. All the other teams, there's a drop-off, whether it's their third line or their fourth line or their third pairing of D, there's a significant drop-off. Now, that being said, the Blues' third and fourth line and their bottom pair D, they're going to have to perform this year. They can't just go out there and rest on their laurels and say, hey, look at the back of my hockey card. I'm a pretty good player, because we saw what happened last year. That wasn't good enough, not even close to being good enough. So if these guys play the way they're capable of playing with the depth that they have, I see the Blues separating themselves a little bit from that mid-tier in the Central Division.
Jamie, I'm looking forward to this season, my man, and I'm really looking forward to hearing you on the Bally Sports Midwest calls to get your breakdown all season long. Appreciate you hopping on our YouTube channel to say hello, and people will be able to hear you coming up today from 2 to 6.
How does Jamie hack into our YouTube to where he joined our show? That's impressive, Jamie.
Have you taken up hacking skills?
T-Bone.
I've
got
like
my
it.
ways, T-Bone.
It's like the voice of God, and he's figuring out how to pop in on our YouTube channel.
That was scary.
Jamie, always love it.
Always watching.
Always love it, my man. Have a good show today. People can listen to you with Stultz from 2 to 6 on the Fast Lane.
All right, thanks a lot, guys.
There you go. Jamie Rivers, our Fast Lane co-host, our teammate here, and of course he's going to be on the call with John Kelly, Bally Sports Midwest, all season long. We'll get more into Blues coming up in 15 minutes, but coming up next, is there a team in the playoffs that you want the Cardinals to emulate going into next season? T-Bone and I feel like it might be a combined teams. We'll discuss next on 101 ESPN. playoff team in baseball that the Cardinals can look at and say, let's be them?
The one that wins it all.
Well, that's a very good point by Tanner Hendrickson. Hopefully it's not Philadelphia, because the Cardinals will be like, meh, let's just keep the snorkeling gear on. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Look, there's a lot of teams that you want the Cardinals to emulate. I would love them to be the Philadelphia Phillies in terms of just signing everybody to 11-year contracts for $200 million. I'd love them to be able to be the Atlanta Braves and recognize talent and lock them up for the next 11 years so you have your core in place. But we also have to be realistic about this. And that's why, for me, Tanner, it's two teams combined. It's the Minnesota Twins and it's the Texas Rangers. Minnesota, because they're going to have, and this is off-season mindset. I think the way they play, there's other teams that you can include in this. But Minnesota, in terms of off-season, because that's the front of the mind for all of us Cardinals fans, Minnesota said, bleep it, we don't want to move on from one of our best players, but we've got to get better in pitching. And they acquire Pablo Lopez for Luis Arraez. The Texas Rangers, meaning we've got a weakness and it's time for us to spend money. And what did they do? They spent money on Jacob deGrom. They spent money on John Gray. They spent money on all of their rotation. And that was the reason that they were one of the best teams in the American League. So those are the two teams that I watch the postseason right now, and I say, they need to find a way to be these two teams. Take the blueprint that they accomplished and put it into place for the Cardinals.
Yeah, I think when I look at the Cardinals, I think the team they could probably most emulate is a blend of the Twins, in which you're going to have a rotation where you don't really have a number one. Probably, like, we hear the names that the Cardinals are at least targeting or considering. It's Aaron Nola, it's Sonny Gray. I mean, Blake Snell's there, but, like, I don't think those guys are, like, legitimate number ones. They're really good number twos that can pitch up to be a number one. I don't view Pablo Lopez as a number one, but he's pitching like an ace so far in the postseason. He's raising his game to the next level when it matters. So I think when you look at what the Cardinals, which team can the Cardinals emulate when they get to if they get to the postseason next year, I think they have a little bit of that Twins vibe where you look at that offense, you go, man, that offense is pretty good. And then you look at their rotation, you go, they don't really have a number one, but they've got two really good number two guys at the front end. And hell, the guy that's pitching for the Twins tonight could be in your rotation. So you could have a Sonny Gray and Aaron Nola, for example, be your 1-2 punch. And that's a really good 1-2 punch. We've seen Nola pitch well in his first game in the playoffs. Sonny Gray's been great for the Twins in the playoffs. And then you look at the offense. And I think when we're talking about the offense, I think the offense could be somewhat like, I know this is going to be crazy, I know people aren't going to like this, could be like the Philadelphia Phillies, where it's solid 1 through 6.
You're insane.
I know people aren't going to like it.
They're not going to spend money.
It's not the spending money part of it. It's what the line.
What their offense?
What the offense needs to do is there's nothing they need to add to that. That offense is in place for next year, and that's why, like, I look at what the Phillies are, and Schwarber, Turner, Bohm, Harper, Realmuto, Castellanos. That's a great 1 through 6, and I think the Cardinals lineup could do, or at least put up similar numbers to that 1 through 6 for them.
Is it crazy, though, to look at Philadelphia and say, like, if you're going to be a team, be Philly? Because you're right, Tanner. They have the offense. Like, you have an offense that's deep enough, depending on if you decide to trade somebody this offseason to get that pitcher. But if you're going to be the Phillies and spend money on pitching, it's really not that crazy to look at them and say, like, they could be Philadelphia. Now, if we're talking about in-game play in terms of those clutch moments, I'm not sure if they have their Bryce Harper or their Trey Turner or their guys that can come up with big plays. But overall, in terms of roster construction and what you're trying to accomplish from game 1 to 162, offense be elite. Well, they showcased that this season, despite what people believe. Go out there and have a 1-2 punch. Even if they're not a legit ace like Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola, you can still go acquire an Aaron Nola and a Sonny Gray or an Aaron Nola and a Logan Gilbert and make that as elite as possible. And then you load up in the bullpen, which we've talked about. You can accomplish by trading some lower-end assets. They have the weapons in place to be Philadelphia without having to spend the billions of dollars in the offseason.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the Twins are like the perfect example of this with their rotation and their bullpen. Like, I looked up, they went from, I think, 2 years ago being one of the worst teams in terms of strikeout percentage to now being one of the best. Their bullpen, they didn't, like, spend significant dollars on it. They have a couple guys that they developed. They have some guys from the Rule 5 draft that they got. So, like, they've done a great job with their bullpen. But I think it's the 1-2 punch of the Twins rotation that reminds me so much of the Cardinals. And their offense was actually pretty good in the regular season, and you just kind of sleep on it because you look at their division.
Right.
And you went, the AL Central's terrible. Their rotation is the one for me that screams, like, if you bring in a Sonny Gray, if you go out and you get a Imanaga, like those are the kind of guys that they won't be viewed as like, oh, the Cardinals added a number one in the offseason. I don't know if they're going to be able to add a number one in the offseason, but you can look at them and say, hey, they can take their can they take their play to the next level once you get to the postseason? Because as we've seen, the Twins, they're tied 1-1 with the Houston Astros. I think the Astros are a better team, but they're getting great pitching from those top two guys and Pablo Lopez, and we'll see what Sonny Gray does tonight.
So let's look at the teams that are out of the playoffs in the National League that are in a position to make the playoffs next year. Because this is the piece from Jim Bowden that was talking about the teams that missed it in terms of positioning for next season to get into the playoffs. Why wouldn't the Cardinals be first? And if I'm not mistaken, T-Bone, they were behind teams like Cincinnati, the Mets. Who were the other teams that they were behind?
So in his power rankings of the teams that missed the playoffs last year, just in the NL and AL, he had the Padres, the Reds, the Mets, the Cubs, and the Giants all ahead of the Cardinals in his power rankings of how they're set up going into the offseason.
And see, like, I already see the text on Air Comfort Service text line. Looking at this through the red glasses like you typically do. Yeah, you know me, big Cardinals homer. That's what I do. But I don't understand how you can have them that low, because Milwaukee's team could look significantly different next year in terms of, are they trading away Corbin Burns? Are they spending money on offense because their offense obviously wasn't that great this year and they were reliant upon their pitching? Cincinnati, I can understand. They've got some weapons in place, but are they going to spend? The Padres, sure. But the Giants and Mets seem to be making some significant changes with their organization. Look, I don't know what the Cardinals are going to view, because if they go soft in the offseason, I'm a little concerned that they put themselves in that spot. But I definitely wouldn't have them that low in this ranking in terms of making the playoffs next year.
Yeah, well, in terms of the teams that missed, I think the only team that I would put them potentially behind is the Reds, because I think the Reds have a great young core. And the only reason I say that is they have to spend too. And that's where I'm skeptical of the Reds. But I think everybody can be skeptical of their team spending in free agency. But I think you're right. I mean, you look at what the Padres are going to be this offseason, and look, their roster, is it in better shape with their superstars right now? Yes. But I think by the time we finish the offseason, I think there's a conversation to be had of what do the Padres look like compared to the Cardinals? Because if the Cardinals add a Sonny Gray or Imanaga, and they add another fifth starter and they add two bullpen arms, if they do everything on their shopping list, which I don't know if I expect them to do all that, but if they do, you're talking about a team that's going to be potentially better than the Padres. The Padres are losing Blake Snell, Josh Hader, have pending free agents, and they are expected to cut back significantly based on reports. The Reds, again, they've got such a great young core that if they add one veteran starter, like if they went out and they add Aaron Nola, they're a team that's going to be tough to beat. But then you look at the Mets. I don't know what to expect on the Mets. They need to reload on offense. They need to add pitching. They still have to hire a manager. And their owner has said, hey, this is kind of a 2-3 year period for us before we're back into contention. The Cubs are going to lose Bellinger and Stroman potentially in free agency. So that's arguably their second best pitcher and their best offensive bat. And then the Giants are just a roster built on average players. I think there's a chance that the Giants add a superstar, but the Cardinals, they've got the offense figured out. They've got to add pitching. And based on everything that I'm expecting, I expect them to do that. I expect them to add two top-end guys to the front of this rotation, add in a fifth, and then help improve the bullpen. And if you do that, I think you're a team that's right back into the conversation of a contending team.
The other part of this that I forgot also, and how Milwaukee's ahead of them, Milwaukee might not even have Craig Counsell next season. And honestly, beyond Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff, I'd argue Craig Counsell is the third most important person for that roster. And if you're finding a new manager in that spot, I know you talked about the Mets looking for their new manager. The teams that missed it, they're making some significant changes in terms of their overall roster, whereas the Cardinals, it feels like it's just making one significant change. But as we all know how the Cardinals go, it'll be James Paxton, and they'll say, well, let's run it back, boys, and see if we can do it again.
If they do that, then they're in the right spot.
Then they'll be in a bad position. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, speaking of roster construction, the Blues have depth. But is that what's going to help them this season? Or is it going to be one specific area? And no, I'm not talking about defense. We'll discuss next on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Raiders were winners last night on Monday Night Football, 17-13 over the Packers. Both of those teams now 2-3 on the season. MLB playoffs last night, the Braves tied up their series with the Phillies, 5-4 in Game 2 for the Braves, 1-1 that series. And for the Diamondbacks, they took a stranglehold on their series, 4-2 over the Dodgers last night. They now lead that series 2-0. Tonight, the playoffs will continue in the MLB. Houston will be in Minnesota to take on the Twins in that tied series. And the Orioles will be in Texas as the Rangers look to move on. They're up 2-0 in that series. You can hear that game right here on 101 ESPN. Pregame will be at 6:30. The NHL kicks off their regular season tonight. The Predators will be in Tampa Bay to take on the Lightning, Blackhawks and Penguins as well. And then the Vegas Golden Knights will host the Seattle Kraken later on this evening. I'm Grant Francis. This SportsCenter update's been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
But and then the other thing too would be if the Kyrie Thomas line can pop off. I mean, it's not unheard of in the NHL to be carried by one great offensive line, and if that line can win you some games, then they might be in business.
That, of course, was Greg Wyshynski, who was on with us, BK and Ferrario, last week. You can go check out that podcast and hear him completely bash on the Blues, 101ESPN.com, presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. But what Greg said there is the part that I would actually agree with. And alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. The Blues are going to be reliant upon that top line. How much of that is tied to this retool, though? I personally feel like if you're making this into a pie, 75% of it's really reliant upon this top line. Because you've got the depth, and that's what you tried to acquire. You brought in Kevin Hayes, you brought back Sundqvist, you've got Blay, you've got Verana, you've got Kapanen. You've got really good assets that are secondary. But the piece of this team that is going to carry them moving forward is going to be Thomas Kyrou and Buchnevich. You've created this top line that you envision to be a top line that can go up against the Nathan McKinnons, that can go up against the Kirill Kaprizovs, that can go up against the Jason Robertsons in the Central Division. And if you can't find a way to not only stop those guys from putting up a ton of points, but also you finding ways to create offense, well, then the season's going to be a mishap. Now, I can understand the push back and say, well, it's going to be on defense, because if your defense struggles, well, then you're going to be bad. Or if it's going to be Binnington. If he struggles, then, well, you're going to be in trouble. Absolutely. But you were reliant so heavily on both the defensive side of the game with Thomas Kyrou and Buchnevich and the offensive side of the game that if it does not work, Buchnevich is a free agent in 2 years, and you've backed your top two young players with $8.125 million for the next 8 seasons. So, yeah, this season is really heavily relied upon that top line being successful.
Yeah, I think there's two things that are going to be the thing that determines how quickly they can get out of this retool and are the driving forces in this retool. And one is this line. Everything you said, I'm 100% on board with. They need Kyrou Thomas and Buchnevich. They need that line to be, as a whole, better and more responsible defensively. They need Kyrou or Thomas, one of those two, to probably take that step and become a superstar. I don't know if you can win in the NHL with just a pack mentality. I do think you need a superstar if you're going to take your game to the next level. So I do think they need one of those guys to become that. And also, when you give them the contracts that you did, the 8-year deals together, you need to be right. If you're going to hand out an 8-year deal, and you know me, I'm anti-extension. I would play out the process and all that, but you've got to be right on those contracts if you're the St. Louis Blues. The other thing for me that is the driving force for them, and I just want to throw this in here because we're talking about this retool, and I said this, I think at the time that the Krug trade rumor was reported, is they've got to find a partner with Colton Parayko. And it's going to be, if they're going to exit this retool, it is two things for me. It is the top line takes the next step, and Parayko gets back to playing at the level that you expect from him, but you also got to find a partner with him too. And I don't know if they can do that this year, but it would be encouraging to see Parayko have a bounce-back season.
Yeah, I'm with you there as well. I think Parayko is a really big deal this year. This is a huge year for him. But going back to that top line for a second, there's one aspect of that top line that has me really optimistic for it, And it's the fact that Robert Thomas looks like he could score 25 goals this season. And I know we're basing that off of preseason play, and I understand that you can't take preseason. You got to take it with a grain of salt. But the way he's shooting the puck is different than the way he shot the puck in the past.
13 times in 4 games.
He's been phenomenal, and he scored, 4 times in those games? Like, he scored more than Jordan Kyrou did in the preseason. And if he's able to replicate that in the regular season, all of a sudden, you can't just focus on Jordan Kyrou. Because in years past, specifically last year, it was almost like, okay, if we're on Jordan Kyrou, Robert Thomas isn't shooting the puck. So as long as we're on Kyrou, we should be okay. Now, defensively, if you're a team looking at that line and Robert Thomas is becoming this 1-2 threat in terms of a shot and a goal scorer, all of a sudden you've got a two-headed monster on that line. And, oh, by the way, Pavel Buchnevich as well.
Yeah, I first of all, like that the Thomas aspect of it is so huge because that line was so predictable. And if Thomas is shooting, it's not predictable. And I think that's what makes lines very dominant to carry you. But I remember what Craig Berube said in one of the preseason practices where they asked him, what are you expecting from Thomas and Kyrou this season? And he said, it's not just those two, it's that line. And he said that line is expected to go up against other teams' top lines. They've got to find a way. And he cited to shut down the McKinnons, the Kaprizovs, the Kopitars, all of these other teams' top lines. You don't have Ryan O'Reilly to fall back on. Like, Braden Shen is a very good player, but he's not the one you're going to be reliant upon. Like, that's the secondary. That's where you hope to get those advantages on the ice. And this is why this retool is so important with this top line. Because let's do the devil's advocate that the season goes the opposite direction. Which means, well, Robert Thomas hasn't shown that step forward in terms of being the two-way number one centerman that we've needed. Who's that guy in our system? You can say Dvorsky, but guys, I hate to break it to you. I love the Dvorsky pick. He's not going to be here for the next 3-4 years in terms of actually being in the NHL of an effective player. He might play here next year, but it's going to be like in a fourth line role like Jake Neighbors. If Kyrou doesn't take that step forward in being a liability on the defensive side, he could put up 40 goals, but if you're giving up all of those goals and you don't have the proper centerman, well, now what? And if you take the step backwards, you probably not bringing back Pavel Buchnevich, because that's going to be a lot of money for a guy that has not clicked. So now this top line that we've expected to take this team into the next era of Blues hockey, if Thomas doesn't get it, if Kyrou doesn't get it, if Buchnevich doesn't get it, where's that next one coming from? And to Tanner's point yesterday, your retool becomes a rebuild because the salary cap, although it's going up, you don't have any defensemen really in the system that are taking over that number one defenseman style. You've got the goaltending, even if it's beyond Bennington with Joel Hofer and Vadim Zarenko, but now you're searching for the next top guys. And you know what that means? You're hoping to get top 5 picks because that's where you get those elite players in the draft.
Would it be a success if this top line, Buch, Thomas, Kyrou, doesn't become a defensive shutdown line, but is great offensively? Because I find this text to be compelling from the 618. You know, they said when you look at the St. Louis Blues, they need to become great at something. And they don't care if it's defense, offense, special teams, or goaltending. They need at least one thing that they can do at an elite level. And I don't know if that top line with Thomas, Buch, and Kyrou will ever get to an elite defensive level. And that's mostly because, like, I think the best case scenario for Kyrou defensively is just to be average. And I think that's fine if Jordan Kyrou becomes an average defender. I don't think he has to become a Selke winning defensive forward. Like, I don't think that needs to be in the conversation. But I do think it is something that if they're going to become elite at something, that line needs to be an elite offensive line. And then hopefully you get just to the point where you feel comfortable with Thomas and Buch on the ice, and maybe they're the guys that help slow down, not stop, but slow down a top line. Because let's just be honest. The Blues, I don't think this line's going to be a shutdown line. I don't think this line could stop a Connor McDavid. I don't think this line could stop a Nathan McKinnon. But can you slow them down enough and then also be elite offensively? That is what this line needs to become.
And that's a really good point from you in the texters because, look, you don't have to have Thomas to be a Selke Trophy candidate. There are a lot of teams. Heck, look at the 2019 Cup champions for the Blues. The top line was Ryan O'Reilly, and although they put up points, the top offensive line in the postseason was Shen, Schwartz, and Tarasenko. The top line of Ryan O'Reilly and David Perron, well, they found ways to eliminate the opposition. Zach Sanford was freaking playing on that line. They found ways to eliminate the opposition so that other lines can take control. You know what you could do if Thomas, Kyrou, and Buchnevich are elite offensively? You could go out and sign a shutdown centerman to be in that second line role. You can bump down or bump over a Shen with a Hayes on the wing or Hayes on the wing with Shen in the middle on the third line, and that second line is your shutdown line. I look at the Minnesota Wild's top line. They're not great defensively. I mean, Ryan Hartman is their number one centerman. He'd be a number 2 on this team. But you know what they got? Elite offensive chemistry with Kaprizov putting up 100-plus points. You've got Ryan Hartman, who's a really good player. Look at the Arizona Coyotes, for instance, also. Like, they're not anything to be scared of, but Clayton Keller and Nick Schmaltz aren't shutting you down. But you know what they're doing? They're putting up a ton of points. So that line, I would say emulate what Minnesota's doing with the top line, and that's where you get success. If I've got one player on that top 3 that's putting up 100 points, if I've got Robert Thomas, who is a reliable centerman, and the other winger who is putting up 60 to 70 points, bingo. Now I've got a team that's exiting the rebuild or exiting the retool, and I can center my team around that line. But if they don't get there, if they're 60 to 70 points and they're minus 30 on the ice, well, then now we're into the conversation of what Craig Button said in terms of nobody's afraid of you. And that's the goal I think this Blues team needs. You got to start making teams afraid of playing against you, whether it's offensively or finding ways to be a little bit more physical on the ice.
Honestly, for me, that top line, if they can just keep up with the other team's top line, if they can leave a game and those 2 top lines are 2-2 even score, I like the Blues' chances with their other 3 lines. I put the Blues' other 3 lines up against most of the other teams in the NHL, and I feel pretty confident. I don't know how you feel about that, but I look at that second, third, and fourth line, and if they're healthy, I put them up against anybody else in the league. Mm-hmm. I really do.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think there are players that are elite on other teams' second and third lines, but it's not the line combination where I think you look at the Blues, to T-Bone's point of Vrana and Kapanen and those guys being successful. That's what's really going to make a difference with this one. One other one that we didn't mention here, and I won't play the audio, but I'll just reference it. Curbs talked about it on the opening drive, how the Blues are going to handle Scott Perunovich, and he basically said, you're not going to see Perunovich and Krug playing in the same game together. And although I would push back a little bit there, and maybe, I mean, Curbs absolutely has more information on that than I do. I think you could if there's an injury to a Nick Leddy. Because if that's the case, or an injury to Justin Falk, because if that's the case, well, now you need another power play weapon on the ice, and that would be a Scott Perunovich. But what I do agree with there, I think Scott Perunovich playtime this season is going to be attached to Nick Leddy and Torrey Krug's health. Because if Marco Scandella or Tyler Tucker get injured, well, the replacement's Robert Bortuzzo. That's why you're carrying 8 defensemen. Penalty killer, physical presence, third pairing defenseman. Scott Perunovich is going to be doing a lot of practices and getting into games if injuries take place or if they really need offense from their defensemen. Otherwise, I think Scott Perunovich is in a platoon role, which might not excite a lot of Blues fans because they're expecting more from him.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to go about this with Scott Perunovich because this is a retool year, and though they are trying to get back into the playoffs, they're trying to balance development with trying to get back into the playoffs, which is a very tough thing to do, as you saw the Cardinals do for the last handful of years. I don't know how they're going to handle this because if you're going to evaluate what you have in Scott Perunovich, you got to play him. And I don't think it benefits him for sitting up in the press box. I kind of agree. We talked to JR earlier. If you missed it, you can check that out on the podcast page after the show, 101ESPN.com, or via the free 101 ESPN app. All podcasts presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. I think if you're going to carry Scott Perunovich on this team, you've got to be playing him because you've got to get an answer on what you have in him. He's 25 years old now, and he hasn't been healthy for the vast majority of his career here as a pro. You've got to start getting answers on what you have in Scott Perunovich. That way you don't either, A, miss out on something in Scott Perunovich and you end up, I don't know, trading him elsewhere and he ends up becoming the guy that you always thought he was going to be. Or, one, he just continues to sit up there in the press box and you never know and you never find out, and it's just a giant question mark and a big what if for the St. Louis Blues organization. They've got to find a way to get him games this year. And I don't know how they're going to do it.
He's Tanner Hendrickson, Grant Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll get back into the Blues in the 1 o'clock hour, but coming up next, we'll dive into the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN. Time to jump into the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN. It is BK and Ferrario, Grant Francis, Tanner Hendrickson, Alex Ferrario with you. T-Bone, what do you got for us today?
All right, now, I want you to pretend you're in college, okay?
Okay. That was 10 years ago.
You're at the University of Southern California. You're at USC.
I'm a Gamecock?
Yeah, no, you're at
that's,
USC.
South Carolina, never mind.
You're a Trojan.
Even better.
And you go to a frat party, your team's getting ready to take on the University of Arizona. And
the Wildcats.
You're at this frat party, and you hear music playing, and you look up, and you know who the DJ is? It's Will Ferrell. How freaking awesome is that? Let's hear a little bit of Will Ferrell's DJing skills here.
Want to be a DJ, he'd be at the top of the list. Like, really? Shaq would be number one.
Oh, that's true.
Shaq would be number one, but like,
dude, he even looks.
I don't know who would get me excited.
Cool too.
Well, God,
he's got the backward hat on, cool. The glasses,
because he looks like
kind of the grandpa little shake.
Who's the famous drummer that he looks like? He looks like. Ryder, can you hear? Who's the? Yeah, the dude from Red Hot Chili Peppers. Like, that's who he is. Like, his doppelganger is. Really? He did a Jimmy Fallon skit where it was he and the dude from Red Hot Chili Peppers that were playing drums at the same time. So, like, that would be pretty awesome. I'm trying to think who could, like, out-excite me on DJs.
So I went to Hofstra on Long Island.
Hofstra, not a big deal. Slaughter.
Yeah.
He doesn't get the reference. He's never watched The Offense.
I didn't get the reference.
The Offense? The Offense. The Office.
Anyway, Adam Sandler plays basketball sometimes at the Hofstra gym.
Will Ferrell would get me more excited than Adam Sandler.
That's still cool.
And I love Adam Sandler, but Will Ferrell would still get me more excited.
The only problem with Hofstra is that it would require...
slaughtered by Cornell?
Probably. It would require them to be playing in a big game.
Well, that'll never happen.
So we don't have a football team. Our basketball team has made the NCAA tournament one time in the past 20 years, and that happened to be the pandemic season that it got canceled. So that's kind of tough.
For people that don't know, Grant Francis is the biggest curse. And like, we think BKO is bad. This dude is the worst curse when it comes to sports. Tell him what you just said right there. Hofstra has never made the tournament until when?
2020.
And what happened?
The pandemic canceled.
And you were a student where?
At Hofstra.
Yeah. Grant Francis might be bigger than BKO.
I could fill up the rest of the show with the curses I've provided to the sports teams that I like.
He might be a bigger curse.
So last night, Alex, I was telling Tanner this earlier. I had, those underdog fantasy things, the pick'ems?
Yeah.
So I had one of those going, and it was looking good. I had Josh Jacobs over 20.5 receiving yards. You know how many receiving yards Josh Jacobs has last night?
Receiving yards?
20.
He had 20. I was like, yeah, that's about right.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
I do like your call, though, on Shaq.
Shaq would be the one that got me most excited because of his DJing skills.
He DJed in St. Louis, right?
Yeah. I think he's actually coming back. It was Mardi Gras.
That's right.
He did a Mardi Gras time.
I remember he was here.
Trying to think of who else would get there, and I really like, because I love me some Will Ferrell. Like, Will Ferrell might be...
It's hard to top that.
It's hard to top Will Ferrell.
I'm trying to think if I know anybody else that does, like...
If you're his son at USC... Like, is it hard to make friends?
No.
Because, like,
are you kidding me? Your dad just DJ'd a frat party.
But that's the problem. Everybody wants to be your friend.
Yeah,
well,
I don't care.
I don't think it'd be hard to make friends, but it would be hard to tell who your real friends are.
Yeah. Like, I feel like that would be the worst in terms of having a celebrity parent, because that would be really hard to sort through. But I guess if you're at a frat party and your dad's DJing, everybody's ready to party with you, right?
Yeah. This would have been awesome.
Tanner wishes he was in college right now for this.
Are you kidding me? If
you
could
wouldn't
say,
even
like,
be able to get close to him.
I don't care. I could at least say, like, I saw Will Ferrell in person. Not like I watched a movie with Will Ferrell in it.
You don't even know Will Ferrell movies.
No,
like,
that's
what's your favorite Will Ferrell movie?
Wasn't he in Step Brothers?
Jesus. Wasn't he in Step Brothers? That's the only answer I needed.
Well, let's confirm that real quick.
He wasn't Step Brothers.
With the old internet machine.
You have to confirm it, which tells me everything. I think I saw Step Brothers in theaters like 8 times.
I'm trying to think. I feel like, Talladega Nights I saw. He was in Talladega Nights. Anchorman, I've seen Anchorman. I've seen a lot of
But you didn't know he was in them.
Well, no, but like when I said Step Brothers, you made me question it for a second. But yeah, I've seen both Anchorman movies. I've seen Step Brothers. I've seen Elf. I forgot he was in Elf.
Overrated movie, by the way. I know it's a rough take. Nobody likes
That's
that
not
take.
even a rough take.
Overrated.
That's the dumb take I've heard today.
I kind of support that notion.
Oh, my God. You guys are crazy.
Barbie.
Wedding Crashers?
He was in Barbie.
The fact that you didn't even reference Old School is just embarrassing. Have either of you seen that?
No.
Oh, my God.
Alex, you know who you're talking to
Believe
right
me,
now.
I do. Both of you guys. My God. Do yourself a favor and do some Will Ferrell education over the weekend.
I'm busy.
Oh, are you?
Me too.
Both of you guys are busy.
I'll be at Will Ferrell's frat party.
Yeah, you'll be at USC meeting up with his son, seeing if you guys can be best friends. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Apparently they have no taste in movies. We'll try and fix that as we move along. But coming up next, something or nothing. The Blues special teams actually showed improvement. Is there one that's more important than the other? We'll discuss next on 101 ESPN. So one area for the Blues going into this season that has to improve is special teams. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. It's weird that I'm saying this because I know preseason is kind of a joke. Frankly, I thought Logan Brown was the top line centerman and from preseason, and we all know how that went. But I am going to start buying some stock into the power play and the penalty kill from preseason. So this was from JR's piece. Preseason Blues power play, third best in the NHL. It went 6 for 20 at 30%. Last year, it was 22nd in the NHL at 19.3%. And for some time there, it was bottom 5. The penalty kill, though, was even more of a problem last year. They finished the year at 30th with a 72.4%. I mean, Grant, we know for a fact, it felt like every power play the other team got, it was going to go in the net.
Well, not only that, but the first half of the season, they were like historically bad. Like NHL all time, they were that bad.
Well, and then in preseason action, they were ranked 12th, but they only allowed 3 power play goals. 3 power play goals in 20 chances, which was 85%. That's what you want to see, and you hope that trend is correct. Now, preseason-wise, you were playing against some teams that were AHL guys. But overall, both schematics that they're trying to work with seem to have success. Here's my question, though. Which one is more impactful for this Blues season? Because I would side heavily on the power play.
Oh, I'm the opposite.
Because I look at this power play this season, and frankly, I just don't know at even strength offense. Like, I think they got the pieces, but we've seen last year, like, frankly, they don't take a lot of shots. And if you're not taking shots, you're not scoring goals. Power play was so bad last year that they couldn't even get set up in the zone. And if this can be a top 10, top 5, I'm going to get really excited about power play. I mean, you're talking about from last season to this season, you're talking about probably adding 5 more wins to their schedule, which is 10 points, which we're talking about a team that's pushing 95 points. So I look at the power play because you're also going to get the best out of Torrey Krug. You're going to get the best out of some of these offensive players, including Thomas and Kyrou. If you're top 5, top 10, this team is going to be pushing for that final wild card spot. So that's why I'd lean heavily on the power play. The success they had in the preseason feels like it can translate to the regular season.
It's tough because I think they're going to have to be good on both. I think both units have to be top 10 if they're going to be a playoff team.
Agreed.
I really believe that. And so, like, it's tough for me to choose a side. I think I would probably side towards the power play because I think they have to outscore their problems. And where are they going to do that? It's going to come on the power play.
Right.
And that was, like, as much as we talk about the team 2 years ago and how they had 9 20-goal scores, don't forget that power play was awesome. And I get it.
It was top 5.
I get it. That penalty kill was good too, but that power play was a difference maker. And you had Perron on that one-timer, and that was deadly. So I would probably side a little bit towards the power play, and I think they got the pieces to do it. And with JR telling us earlier when we talked to him that, the puck moving looks a little bit better and looks crisper, that's a good sign. That's a good sign. That is one of those that should translate to the regular season. I'm still skeptical if the PK will translate to the regular season, but it does look like it is taking steps in the right direction. And you've got better penalty killers now. Oscar Sundqvist, a great penalty killer. Depending on what they do with their lineup, you got Scandella, Tucker, guys that can kill penalties. So I like the pieces they have. If I had to say like one that I would side with that needs to be better than the other that is more important, I would side towards the power play.
I think what I want and what I think will happen when it comes to the penalty kill and power play are two separate things. What I think will happen is that the power play will be better than the penalty kill. I think if you could choose one, the penalty kill would be the one that you would like to see be even better, especially if you're comparing it to last season. The power play last season was average to below average. They weren't great, but they also weren't terrible, like bottom 5 in the league. The penalty kill was awful last season. The penalty kill at times lost them games, and the momentum that they lost on the penalty kill was outrageous last year. Like, even if they didn't give up a goal, they were giving up so many opportunities. The zone time was almost the full 2 minutes a lot of the times for the other team in the offensive zone. It was awful. And even if the Blues had something going 5-on-5 and they were clicking, which at the beginning of the season was not very often, but when it was happening, if they took a penalty, all of that momentum was immediately gone because the penalty kill just could not keep up with what the other team was doing. So translate that into this season. If the Blues can improve on that penalty kill, and I mean, there are times where if you're a penalty kill and you take a penalty and you come out and you don't give out chances at all, and you shut the other team down on that power play, all the momentum transfers back to your side. So if they're able to do that, I think a successful penalty kill, I think, can be more important than a successful power play. Also because I think offensively the Blues can do a lot 5-on-5 this year as well.
We love X factors, right? For teams, we always talk about X factors, that devil magic that the Cardinals have, which they didn't have this year.
We were close. So.
We were close. Taylor Motter, right there. Can I give you an X factor on why the penalty kill is going to be good?
Yeah.
It's
Kevin Hayes?
No, it's Mike Weber. I don't even know if Kevin Hayes is going to be seeing significant penalty.
Is this a defenseman we signed?
Yeah. Well, he used to be a defenseman in 2015, T-Bone, and he was okay. But look, Mike Weber as their assistant coach on the defensive side, he's an X factor, not just on the penalty kill, but I think defensively overall. Kerry Davis, they were talking about it on an opening drive, and he asked me in the office after the show. He said, let me ask you this. Why should I believe the defense is going to be better? And I said, Mike Weber. It's the only reason you can hold hope that they're going to be better. But on the penalty kill specifically, Mike Weber has added a little bit of ferocity to the defenseman in terms of willingness to block shots, playing in the box in terms of this box right in front of the goaltender. They're not leaving space available for players to park themselves in front of the net. If this penalty kill is doing what Grant just said, it's because Mike Weber has put a different scheme in place that the players have bought into. It's the only way it's going to work. Because if the players don't buy into what Mike Weber's preaching, well, then guess what they're going to do? They're going to revert back to what they've done in the past. And what they've done in the past was the 27th worst penalty kill in the National Hockey League. Mike Weber, if he can find ways to hone in on their skills in terms of blocking shots and clearing out space, and ESPN had this. They mentioned Mike Weber as the X factor. This is what it wrote. It really is whatever Weber can do to turn around the Blues' defensive issues. Focusing this much on an assistant coach can be considered a bit much, but what justifies the discussion about Weber is the fact the Blues were bottom 10 in shots allowed per 60, goals allowed per 60, scoring chances allowed per 60, and high danger chances per 60. Having that context along with the context and dynamics is what makes Weber and whatever he can accomplish with the Blues this season paramount. We talked about it in preseason, Grant. They look like a unit that understands what needs to be in place. Joey talked about the die on a 5 dice, the 2 dots in the box and then 1 in the middle. That's how they play the defensive zone. Penalty kill wise, that's what's going to be successful for them. And frankly, we should give Mike Weber his roses if they are successful.
Go look at the heat maps on Natural Stat Trick for the Blues preseason games, and it is all to the outside for the most part. We were talking about that in the last preseason game we did, Alex, about how so much of it was to the outside and they were limiting the chances in front of the net, which is what they weren't doing last year at all, and that's huge. And it seems like Mike Weber is the one that is implementing that mindset. That's exactly what this team needs.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what this defense looks like. And I mean, you mentioned it perfectly on 5-on-5 with what they'll look like is like a 5 on a dice. So I'm fascinated to know if Mike Weber is the X factor. I think it's a lot of pressure to put on a coach to say,
absolutely,
hey, go fix this same defense that struggled mightily last year. It's the same conversation I think we kind of overlooked coming into this season with Dusty Blake, where it was go add swing and miss to a pitching staff that doesn't have swing and miss.
Right.
It's like, okay, he might be able to help that, but that's a big ask. So I think the same conversations with Mike Weber. Is he an X factor for the Blues? He definitely might be. He may be the guy that ends up turning this around for the St. Louis Blues. And the defense, again, I don't know if this defense will ever get back to being at an elite level, but if he can get them back to being average, it's a difference maker for St. Louis.
Blues finished last year 20th in the NHL in blocked shots, 1,100 of them. You add 100 more blocked shots, you're talking about a top 10 penalty kill because, and frankly, defense improves significantly because of the willingness to get in front of those shots. So it's odd to say when an assistant coach is an X factor for something, but for how bad the defense was and you have the same defensive unit this season, he is the X factor. And if it doesn't work, guess what? Berube's tied to that because that was a Berube hire.
Well, and penalty kill wise too, yes, we have the same defensive group for the Blues, but you're also getting Marco Scandella back. Hopefully he stays healthy. But that was a huge part of the penalty kill being terrible last season, was you didn't have one of your best penalty killers in Scandella.
Yeah, health is going to be crucial in all of this. And we'll talk more about the defense coming up in 15 minutes. But coming up next, our Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. You give us a scenario, we'll tell you if we are in or out next on 101 ESPN. I had to make up for last week, so I hope that got everybody excited.
Yesterday's was bad.
Oh, yeah, yesterday, not last week. I don't know. My days are rolling together these days. I'm forgetting stuff. I left the house today without my bag. Last week, I forgot my laptop charger. It's been a rough couple of days for your boy, so hopefully we'll get this thing rolling throughout the day. Send us your scenarios, 314-399-9646. That is our Air Comfort Service text line. As it is time for In or Out. You tell us the scenario. We'll tell you if we are in or out. Let's start with this one, boys. In or out, the Blues finish above the Nashville Predators in the standings.
Boy. I'm going to say in because I think they are slightly better than Nashville. I tend to agree with you to where I don't understand the hype that the Predators are getting. But with that being said, I still don't know if the Blues are a playoff team. Just to give fans like a idea here, FanDuel over-under point total for the year has the Predators 87.5, the Blues 86.5. I could see those being flipped to where the Blues still miss the playoffs, but finish slightly ahead of the Predators. So I think I'm in on this one.
I'm going to go in on it too, but I think it's going to be down to the wire at the end of the season where Nashville and St. Louis are. I think it's going to be really, really close.
So I'm in on this one, that the Blues are going to finish above them.
No.
And what?
I'm shocked.
You know what, Grant? Turn your mic off, as Tanner likes to say. So when we talked with Wyshynski last week, he said he was excited because he feels like that Andrew Brunette's going to create great offense for that team. And he's not wrong. Like Brunette, when he was the head coach of the Florida Panthers, when he took over when Joel Quenneville left, they finished with the most goals scored in the National Hockey League, 337 of them. But these are the guys on that roster. Jonathan Huberdeau, Sam Reinhart, Barkov, Duclair, Verhaeghe, Sam Bennett, Mason Marchment, Mackenzie Weegar. Who are those guys for Nashville? Because Philip Forsberg, absolutely. But Nashville last season, in terms of where they ranked offensively, they ranked, still scrolling, 223 goals, which was 28th in the National Hockey League. And they lost Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson. So although I do agree that their defense is going to be good and their goaltending is going to be great, where are they scoring more goals to put them above the Blues? I don't see that. And I love Ryan O'Reilly. So I'm in on this one. Blues are going to finish above the Nashville Predators. And I think a lot of people are going to be like, how did this happen? Because their GM said that they're rebuilding.
Our GM said we're retooling.
That's better. That's at least 2 games better.
I wouldn't count on that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, too, but Andrew Brunette, when he took over in Florida, wasn't that the year that Joel Quenneville was there and basically had that team primed and ready to go anyway?
Yeah, and exactly. And you had 5 All-Stars on the team. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm a little skeptical with this one. T-Bone, what do you got for in or out?
In or out, we see the debut of Connor Bedard tonight as the Blackhawks take on the Penguins. In or out, he'll be a point-per-game player this year with over 82 points.
I thought you were asking in or out, he's going to play tonight. I'm like, in? Over 82?
Yeah.
I'm going to say in on this one. I'm not all aboard the hype train of Connor Bedard, just in terms of thinking that he's
overrated,
the godsend to the NHL. I think McDavid is significantly a better player than Connor Bedard, mostly because of his size. McDavid's 6'1", Bedard's 5'8", 5'9". I think he's going to put up more than 80 points though. Because when you're that elite, and what do we always say about bad teams? Somebody's got to score.
That was my thing.
And he's going to be on a line with Taylor Hall, and Taylor Hall is going to be a point producer. So I don't think Connor Bedard is going to score more than 30 goals, but I do think he's going to be an 80-point player. So I'm saying I'm in.
Yeah, I'm with you as well. I'm going to go in on this. It's the bad team thing for me. He's going to get time in every situation. And the fact that he's playing with Taylor Hall, a lot of people forget Taylor Hall won the Hart Trophy. What was that, 2018?
Yeah, that was the year in New Jersey, and then he got traded the next year.
Yeah, and he was good with the Bruins the past couple seasons, so I think he'll have some success on that top line.
Yeah, I think I'm in too. I agree. I don't think he's going to be a 100-point player. I can't remember who it was. I saw somebody make, all the bold predictions.
I think it was Saravalli this morning.
It may have been Frank Saravalli.
I don't know. Everybody's making their bold predictions.
Everybody's making bold predictions, and I think it was Saravalli said he thinks he gets 100 points. I'm not there.
No.
I think he is, though, an 82-point player. I think he can be that 82 to 90. 100 may take a year for him to get there, but because he needs a better supporting cast probably. But I would say I'm in on this.
Connor McDavid scored 100 goals in his second season. The first year was
100 points, right?
Oh, yeah, 100 points. His first season was the shortened year, and he got 48 points. But the second season, he got 100 points. But the dude had Leon Draisaitl playing with him.
What's he ever won?
You're right. What's he ever done in the NHL? Draisaitl scored 29 goals that season. McDavid got 30. Yeah, give me a Draisaitl and I'll absolutely buy into it. But in 2 years, I can absolutely see Chicago having this elite sensational player. But up until then, yeah, I'm not there yet. Grant, what do you got?
All right, in or out, the Buffalo Sabres finally break their non-playoff streak and make the playoffs this season.
I'm going to say in on it because I think Buffalo is going to go all out this season, mostly because cap hell is coming because you've just gave Dahlin $11 million. Owen Power is going to have to get paid. You already paid Thompson, and Skinner's making $9 million. I'm not sold on their goaltender yet. Devon Levi is a young player.
He looks really good, though.
Looks great, but how many times have I freaking said that in the NHL for young goaltenders?
Hey, you forgot about our guy Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen.
Yeah, didn't he go on waivers, or did they keep him on the team?
Probably.
I think they're going to sign Patrick Kane.
Yeah.
And I think their offense is going to be elite. I think they'll be a wild card team, so I'll say I'm in.
I think I'm in too. I'm very skeptical of Buffalo. Like, I don't want to buy too much because I'm not convinced of their goaltender either. But I think when you look at the East, I think Boston's going to be taking a step back. Florida, I think, takes a step back. I think there's a lot of questions with some of those other kind of fringe teams as well. So can they sneak into the wild card picture? I think they can. And when you've got a guy like Tage Thompson that's centering things on your top line and putting up the points that he does, they could easily be that team.
Everybody should absolutely prepare for Tage Thompson to score 100 points this season. Everyone be like, oh, what a terrible trade the Blues did. They should have kept Tage Thompson.
That's what I said in the office.
Yeah, flags fly forever, right, boys?
Well, what if they get a flag? What if they get two?
I can promise you they won't.
By the way, I think Buffalo's going to be top 3 in the Atlantic this year.
So the Atlantic is...
It's so watered down this year. Boston's losing everything. I think Florida misses the playoffs this season.
You want a bold prediction? Boston's going to miss the playoffs this season.
Tampa Bay is hurting right now.
Tampa Bay will make a run at the end of the season.
Yeah, I agree. But I think that division is getting so watered down. Like, you've got Toronto at the top for sure right now. And then after that, it's like up for grabs for me.
In or out, guys, from the Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. Nolan Gorman for Zach Gallen straight up.
I mean, I'm in, but it would never happen.
I was going to say, it's out in terms of the Diamondbacks.
Yeah, no, the Diamondbacks wouldn't want to do it. I mean, they got a top 2 arm in their system, or with the team, I should say. So would I love to see it happen? Yeah. Would it ever happen? No. So I guess out.
Yeah. In or out, the Cardinals will be in on the Mike Trout trade conversation.
See, I'm actually out on this. I know early on I said it felt like a
Cardinals move,
where it is a superstar on a long-term contract or on the verge of a long-term contract like Goldschmidt was, and it's the perfect move for the Cardinals. They swoop in, they make the trade. Really, the team's desperate, doesn't have any leverage, and you get a steal. Look at the Goldschmidt, look at the Arenado trade. I don't think they'll be in the conversation for it because they're going to be adding a ton of money onto their books with pitching acquisitions, to where they can also look at it and say, he's been injured a lot the last handful of years. We can get away with Tommy Edman or Lars Nootbaar in center field until Victor Scott's here. And Victor Scott's going to be here, if not next year, then the following year.
I think the Cardinals going after Mike Trout would be like the Blues going after William Nylander. Like, you're going after something that doesn't satisfy your needs at all.
But Nylander stays healthy at least.
Well, but what I'm saying is, like, the Cardinals need pitching, the Blues need defense.
Right.
You've kind of got, in a sense,
I get
what you're going after if you do that.
It's why we've kind of said Shohei Ohtani doesn't really make much sense for the Cardinals because he's not pitching. And, I mean, frankly, you've got a lot of offense. And I understand you want Shohei Ohtani, but for $500, $600 million.
And frankly, you're never going to get him.
Well, over the gateway to the West, man. He's almost to the coast. Didn't we talked about this yesterday.
Yeah, I'm not buying the whole theory.
Come on, man. In or out, the NFL should have a toilet bowl game at the end of the season where the winner gets the first round pick.
Oh, I'm out
first
because
overall pick.
I do not want to watch that at all. That would be brutal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand what that benefits. Like, obviously, sure, you get a competitive game, but who cares?
I guess if you like a dumpster fire, like if you enjoy watching things just go poorly, like, whew.
We just had Broncos Bears. Wasn't that enough?
Yeah. Frankly, you know what it should be? It'd be a lottery again. Everything should be a lottery. And I know that you don't like it.
What if you had the bottom 2 teams play for the top pick?
That's what this is.
That's what they're talking about.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah,
that'd be interesting.
Toilet bowl game.
See, I wouldn't
watch it.
I wouldn't want to watch it because those 2 teams are bad. The other thing, too, is where it would become a problem is those teams know what they're playing for.
And then they just blow it.
For example, like I think I saw this texter said the Bears and Patriots are this year's teams that are competing. You wouldn't see Justin Fields play quarterback. You'd see that quarterback that was at the D3 level. You wouldn't see Bailey Zappi or Mac Jones. Hell, the Patriots would probably start Stevenson at quarterback. Like, there would be all kinds of weird things that would go on. It would not be fun to watch.
You're going to watch them tank like they did all season long. Yeah, Zappy versus who knows the backup with the Chicago Bears. Like, if you want to do it, you make it a tournament. But even then, I could care less, and the teams aren't going to buy in on that because it's games that matter,
I'm a huge supporter of relegation. If there was a second league of
XFL,
football,
man.
well, that ain't it. If there was a second league,
that ain't it.
Then it would be great to do a relegation thing. I think that's what the MLS needs. But no league will do that here over in America.
Let's do one more. In or out, Colton Parayko leads the team in blocked shots this season.
I'll go in because I think he's going to have so much ice time this season. So, yeah, I'll go in on that.
I don't know. I think I'll go in on it, too, because he'll have a lot of ice time. I was thinking maybe someone that's on a penalty kill, but I guess he'll be on a penalty kill, too, would lead the team in block shots. So I think I'll be in on that.
I was really hoping one of you were going to be adamant about it not happening because Parayko's bad, because I was just going to get you to fall into my web. He led the team last year in block shots. He had 144. But props to you guys for having faith in Colton Parayko. I'm starting to make progress with both of you.
Sometimes when you're 6'6", you can run into
bad
a
about
puck.
Yeah, you
Colton
do. All the
Parayko.
time I hear it. Jeez, so Colton Parayko.
I'm about to leave. Tanner, take over the board. I'm out.
Sometimes blocking a shot's not a skill; it's luck.
You're not in?
Puck just hits you.
Whoa!
Sometimes I didn't say all the time.
No, yeah, you're absolutely true. And when you're 6'6", that makes sense. Speaking of that, does D size matter? We're going to discuss that next on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Raiders took down the Packers on Monday Night Football last night, 17-13 the final score. 2-3 are the records for both of those teams after last night's game. And in the MLB playoffs last night, two good games. Atlanta wins over the Phillies 5-4 to tie that series at 1 game apiece. And the Diamondbacks 2-0 series lead on the Dodgers after a 4-2 win last night over L.A. Tonight, the playoffs will continue. We'll have one game here on ESPN. Baltimore and Texas, that game 3, as Texas is up 2-0 in that series. You can hear it on 101 ESPN. Pregame will start at 6:30. And the other game tonight, Houston and Minnesota. That series tied 1 game apiece. Game 3 tonight in that series. NHL regular season kicks off tonight as well. The Predators and the Lightning, the Blackhawks and the Penguins, and then the Vegas Golden Knights, the defending Stanley Cup champions, will host the Seattle Kraken. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports Center update's been driven by Johnny Londoff. Find new roads and shop 24/7 at londoff.com and londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
So does defensive size matter in the NHL this season? That was one question that Ray Ferrario posed on his podcast, and alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. A lot of people were probably thinking I was speaking of something else. I wasn't. We were talking defense all along. This is what Ray Ferrario had to say yesterday. One thing I see that's really common is you do not win with a small defense. It's what he told Eric Duhatschek on the Athletic podcast. And I agree, because, look, you've got to have big defensemen if you're going to have success in the NHL. But I don't think that means you need it if you're going to win the Stanley Cup. And I understand why he's saying it, because who just won the Stanley Cup? Vegas Golden Knights. And here's what the Vegas Golden Knights roster was last year in the playoffs on the defense. 6'6" Nicholas Hague, 6'3", 6'1", 6'4", 6'3", 6'2", 6'2". Yeah, those are some freaking tree trunks out there. But if you go to years past, Colorado when they won, here's what their defensemen size were. 6'4", 6'1", 6 foot, 5'11", 6'1", 6'3", 5'10", 6'1". If you go to the team that played them in the playoffs last year, so the Florida Panthers that lost to the Vegas Golden Knights, here's their defensive side. 6'4", 6 foot, 6 foot, 6 foot, 6 foot, 5'11", 6 foot, 6'4". It's a copycat league. You see it all the time. And so Vegas, who just won the Stanley Cup, you look at it and say, well, we got to be bigger on defense if we want to play. But guess what? That's an anomaly. Like, it's what worked, but it's not what always works. What always works is what we've seen in the NHL. Look who's won the Norris Trophy. The Norris Trophy has been won by smaller stature defensemen. Why? Because they create offense. As much as you need some big defensemen, you also need offense from your defensemen, because otherwise you're stuck in your own zone the entire time, and you're hoping that these big tree trunks just continue to block shots. So as much as I do look at Vegas and say, yeah, it would be great to have 6'4" and 6'5" and 6'6" all the way around, you could still win in the NHL with guys who are 5'10", 5'11", but it's not like the Blues have small defensemen. Their smallest guy is Torrey Krug, and he's at 5'11". Everybody else is 6 foot, 6'1", 6'3", 6'4", 6'6". You've got fine size. It's about what you do with it in the games.
That's what I was going to say. I'm not sure it's so much size that matters for the defenseman for the Blues. It is more so of you can't be shoved around in front of your own net, and that is more of will than it is size that plays. And look, the size does play a factor of it. You're going to have a tougher time if you're a smaller stature defenseman like Scott Pernovich or Torrey Krug.
Yeah, you got to be offensively great.
But you still cannot be a guy that just gets knocked around and is an easy pillar to be moved around in front of your own net. And I thought that was a big issue for the Blues last year. And that even went for their tallest defenseman in Brayco at 6'6". And I'm not saying he's got to be Chris Pronger and cross-checking guys out of that crease, but he does have to do a better job of clearing guys from out of the net. And I think that's the biggest thing when you look at the Blues defense. I'll never forget that cut we had from Craig Button where he said nobody in the Western Conference fears your defense. Well, maybe they don't have to be a feared defense, but they can't be a defense that gets shoved around like at times they were last year. And that is going to be the biggest thing for them. It's not so much of, well, they've got to add length or they've got to add size. No, they just got. It doesn't matter how big and tall you are. It is more of, are you willing to do what is necessary to clear the front of your net and make sure there aren't easy tap-ins or easy backdoor plays there?
Yeah, I totally agree. And we got a good text from the 618. D-size certainly helps, but being able to play big along with elite skating, great puck movement, and elite defensive skills like stick work, shot blocking, and positioning are more important. I couldn't agree more. Like, you mentioned that Colorado team that didn't have the size on defense, but you look at Devon Taves, who was one of their best shutdown defensemen that year. Devon Taves is small. He's not a very tall guy
6'1".
at all. Yeah. So you look at players like that, you don't have to be these guys that are huge to have great defensive skills. Torrey Krug has played in 2 Stanley Cup finals. Yes, he hasn't won one, but he's played in 2 Stanley Cup finals, 2 teams that were very good. And, I mean, he was on that team in 2022 for the Blues that had a really good playoff run and almost, obviously we reference it all the time, the injury to Bennington, how far that team could have gone. But it comes down to, I think, a lot of what that text said about those defensive skills and being able to keep up that way. You don't always have to be super tall. It certainly helps, but it's not 100% necessary.
Yeah, I think when Craig Button was on with us and he said, like, nobody's afraid of the Blues, and people hear that and say, well, obviously not. You got to be more physical. I think what he means by that is nobody's afraid of the Blues because they're easy to play against in their own zone. You know how you're not easy to play against in your own zone? As soon as the puck's on your stick, you're out of the zone, and you're already skating up the ice. Speed is scary right now in the NHL, which is why Adam Fox and Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes, why these guys are so wanted by teams, because they're good in the offensive zone, their puck skills are awesome, and they move it quickly up the ice. Guys, the defense has always been big in Vegas. And prior to last season, you never really hear them talking about it. When Tampa won the Cup in back-to-back years, yeah, they've got Victor Hedman and they've got Mikhail Sergachev, who are big players, but they also had, what's-his-face that was traded to Nashville, the guy that we wanted here. Why am I blanking on his name? The player that played for the New York Rangers was traded to Nashville because Tampa had a bad spot.
McDonough?
Yeah, Ryan McDonough. Ryan McDonough's 6'1". Like, they had Ian Cole. Ian Cole's 6 foot. Luke Shen, 6'1". Like, You've got to be a healthy mix of physicality and puck movement. That's where defensemen are so good. And when you look at the Blues, they have it. It's just a matter if you're willing to accomplish it, which goes back to our X Factor conversation of Mike Weber. Mike Weber's trying to utilize these guys in the right way, blocking shots. When you've got 6'3", 6'6", 6'2" on the ice in terms of Parayko, Scandella, Bortuzzo, and Tucker, you could take up space. That's where you want to accomplish it. And then when Krug and Falk are out there, you're offensively inclined. That's how this team has success. Not so much of being 6'4" and 6'6". That's great, but sometimes that doesn't mean everything. There's a lot of 6'6" defensemen haven't even made it to the NHL.
Yeah, and I can't remember the defenseman that we talked about with the Flames that was a huge body that was 6'6" or 6'7".
Oh, that was Zadorov.
Yeah, and I remember we had a Calgary Flames beat writer on. And he was like, yeah, there's always 2 to 3 minutes in a game where you have to close your eyes because it is just
look at Nico Mikkola.
Yeah,
Mikkola was 6'6", and we're like, oh, there he is.
Yeah, and they tried to make that work, and they just couldn't. It just didn't work for him. He's going to be more of a depth or third pairing defenseman.
Absolutely,
and that's where it just comes down to the will in front of the net, and playing that aggressive and making sure you are able to get pucks out of the zone and not turning the puck over because. We've talked about it. Krug can have a bounce-back year, and it's probably not going to be on the defensive side of the puck. Where's he going to bounce back? He's going to bounce back on the offensive side. Parayko's the one guy that I would circle that I would say his size needs to be a difference maker. He needs to use his length. He needs to use his skating ability to get out of the zone.
I'd say Parayko and Scandella fall into that category. Those are the two guys that if you look at and you say size is going to be important, it's going to be those two guys. Penalty kill on the ice so much, talking about clearing the front of the net, especially on a third pair if Scandella's there. And my guess is they're going to be platooning him with Parayko late in games if they need shutdown. That's where size is going to be important for them to clear the front of the net. That's where it's going to take over.
100% agree.
Now, one more, the Blues, I guess it could fall into the defensive side of this, but it could also just fall in general. We talked earlier with Rivs about the Blues being heavily underrated in terms of viewing this team as like an 85-point team falling back. Can they take that and use it as an advantage in terms of this Western Conference season? Because a lot of people view this. I don't think the Blues are going to be a conversation for a lot of people other than, well, they're just not a good team. And you've got a group of guys who are trying to prove something, specifically individuals who are trying to prove something. I'm thinking Kyrou Thomas, Torrey Krug, Jordan Bennington. I really feel like that could be advantageous to this Blues team of not having the outside noise of, oh, well, they're obviously a cup contender, or, oh, they have the pieces in place to be one of the better teams in the West. This team always feels like it benefits from being the underdog going into the season of, well, they're bad, don't have much to show for it. Because even last year, people weren't talking about them being bad. They were talking about, well, look at what they just did. They can continue that this season.
I think it can go one of two ways. I think, one, it is something that kind of lights a fire under you to prove, hey, we're not as bad as people think. Go against the grain. We're going to be a playoff team. Everybody's counting us out, and that can motivate the troops and get everybody going inside that locker room and kind of solidify the message coming from the coaching staff. If you want to be a playoff team and prove everybody wrong, here's what we've got to do. But I can also see where it just ends up going completely south real quick. And that's why I asked JR when we had him on, how important is it to get off to a fast start? And I think it is true. Like in their first 10 games, they probably need to be above 500. They can't be 3-7.
Yeah.
They can't be 2-8. Why? Because otherwise they're going to have thoughts creep into their mind of, maybe we are that team that everybody thought coming into the preseason. Maybe we can't turn this around defensively. Maybe we aren't the guys that are going to turn this around. We're not playing a team style of game. All those thoughts start to creep back in your head if you get off to a slow start. And that's why I'm not saying Thursday's a must win because it's game 1, but that's why in the first 10,
Every game's a must win.
Yeah, you got to go 82-0.
Yes.
That's why, though, the first 10 games, you got to be about 500, if not better than 500.
Yeah.
That way you're not having those thoughts of, oh, boy, here we go again.
I was talking to Bernie Federko at the game, I guess it was Saturday, against the Blackhawks, and he's like, this season truly feels like if you have a bad October, you're not making the playoffs because it's so wide open. And he said, unless you've got teams that are also really bad in October, but he said, you look at the Pacific and the Central, top heavy. Both sides have 3 elite teams, and you're going to be chasing those 3 teams if you fall short in October. And that's where this one's going to come down to. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, Alex Ferrario. We'll hit the rewind next on 101 ESPN. Final time as we dive into the Rewind here on 101 ESPN alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. Don't forget, if you miss anything from today's show, you can check it out on our podcast page, 101ESPN.com, which is always presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. And if you missed anything on our YouTube channel, you can go back and check that out at 101 ESPN STL. It is presented, as always, by the beautiful Air Alliance team. Now that we got our big backboard up, I'm assuming people on YouTube can see that now. Or I even pointed the right direction. It could be over on this side of me. It could be up. It could be down. Grant, where is it? Tell me when to stop.
Yeah, you just pointed into the void. If you point over your left shoulder,
there you go.
I feel like I'm a weatherman on those green screens. You ever have to do one of those? I did that at college, and they're like, no, you got to point to Missouri, and you're pointing to, like, Texas. I'm like, I don't know where I'm at right now.
Not for me.
That's why I don't do green screens. We've got baseball tonight, playoff baseball, potentially elimination game baseball as the Rangers taking on the Orioles. Game 3 action with pregame starting at 6:30, so you'll be able to hear that here on 101 ESPN. Let's rewind it, though, with the Blues topic of the top line, because we talked about this with Jeremy Rutherford. We talked about this in the 12 o'clock hour. How reliant this season and this retool that Doug Armstrong has talked about is on this top line of Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, and Pavel Buchnevich. And T-Bone, the more I think about going into this season, the more I look at those three players, the more I go back to Greg Wyshynski's comment. Like, it is very possible, and we see it in the NHL, of one line carrying a team through the regular season into the postseason. And if you've ever needed to see a next step, it's those three guys, and really two of them. Buch just really needs to stay healthy, but it's the next step for Kyrou and Thomas to carry this team into the playoffs.
Yeah, 100%. You need to see them take that step. You want to see them be a little bit better defensively, but I think the spot that they're going to really improve, and it's not like they're bad at this now, but it's become a lead at, is offensively. Can Thomas take that step with his goal production? And he's a playmaker. He can pass the puck, but can he be a guy that can get to, if he's going to get to the 100-point plateau, he's going to need to be a 30-goal scorer. Can Kyrou get to that potentially? That is the thing for that top line is, that they have the offensive skill. Can they improve slightly defensively to where maybe they're not a shutdown pairing or a shutdown line, but to what Grant said earlier, where it is, you go against McKinnon's line, do you leave that game 2-2 instead of being outscored 2-0? That is the thing for me, and that's the thing that you're going to have to see from them. They are going to be a driving force in this retool. They are just starting year one of that 8-year contract that the two of them signed, Thomas and Kyrou. So they are the guys that are supposed to become the next face of the franchise that leads you into the next phase of St. Louis Blues hockey. And this is a big year for the St. Louis Blues, and it's not just them that we're going to be looking at. I mean, there's a ton of question marks that need to be answered this year in year one of this retool.
Couple of news nuggets to hit on before we get out of here. One of them in the NHL, one in the NFL. Let's start with the NHL. This just was put out by Elliot Friedman, and this goes to the point of what you and I were talking about, Grant, like how the bleep are the Vancouver Canucks viewed as like a 90-point team this season. Friedman tweets, there's word this afternoon that Vancouver has granted Connor Garland permission to talk to other teams about a potential trade. Tight cap situation, see if there's a better fit around the NHL. Connor Garland last year had 17 goals, 46 points, was a -5. The year prior, 52 points, 19 goals, and a +18. I bring this up as just kind of a hypothetical. Do you investigate this if you're St. Louis? In terms of maybe you can move on from a defenseman to open up space for Scott Perunovich if you can bring in a Connor Garland who provides offense. He's small, he's fast, scores goals.
I think it's interesting. I like Connor Garland a lot. I liked him in his time in Arizona.
Yeah, because he lit up the Blues.
Well, yeah, that's true. Every time the Coyotes play the Blues, it doesn't end well for St. Louis. But I have always liked Connor Garland, and I also find it interesting because he's a player that I don't quote me on this. I don't think he's ever been in the playoffs because he was with Arizona, now Vancouver. If Vancouver's supposed to be this team that's taking this big step and approaching possible playoff contention, and he wants out, those two things don't add up. But when it comes for the Blues side of things, I don't really see it happening. I don't see a trade happening for St. Louis.
There's no space for
That's
him.
the big thing. Yeah. Like, if the Blues had space, maybe they do explore it, but there's just such a logjam of opportunity
thinking
there.
of trying to get out of a contract like, say, Nick Leddy that opens up a spot for Scott Perunovich, but again, you're getting a Connor Garland to play on your fourth line.
But like, if you who are you opening up that space for?
And it'd have to be more than Leddy because Leddy's not even making 4.95, and that's what he is.
And
so
you have $200 million or $200,000 in cap space.
So I can't see them A, exploring it, B, being able to pull it off. Mostly because, like, I don't even know where Garland fits. I understand what you're saying, though. You add another goal scorer, and honestly, they're probably what the Blues are going to be is a goal-scoring team that outscores their problems.
But honestly, he's probably sitting every night because who's sitting?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Is like I just don't see how this would make sense for the St. Louis
Unless
Blues.
you put in a forward with a defenseman, but a tight cap spot, Vancouver's not eating that. So just interesting that pops up, but it's more so about the Vancouver Canucks. The other one, T-Bone's in the NFL. Justin Jefferson officially shut down for the next 4 weeks. He's going to the injured reserve list. Hamstring, I guess, issue that happened in last week's game. It's over for Minnesota. Like, it's officially over. You're 1-4. You're not having him for 4 weeks, which means more than likely you're going to be 1-8 or 1-7 if they've got a bye week. You trade away Kirk Cousins as soon as possible, right? Like, you trade him to the Jets right now.
I don't know. I mean, it makes sense if you're the Jets. The thing I don't know about with the Vikings is I don't know how you pull off his deal and how his cap hit works and all that. Like,
because it's dead space if you trade him.
It's a very complicated trade that would have to go down, but it would make sense for a team like the Jets that could pull that off. I'm trying to think who else would kind of fit into this category. But like, it makes all the sense in the world because like he's probably not going to be there next year. Like, this is probably the final year I would assume that he's a Minnesota Viking. So
like, if you're Minnesota, you lean into being bad the rest of this season and go for Caleb Williams, right?
Oh, yeah.
You get a Caleb Williams, move on from Kirk Cousins, tell Jefferson, be healthy for next season. It's a lost season already.
100%. 100%. They're a team that is in desperate need of a rebuild.
Yeah.
And trading Cousins makes all the sense in the world. It's just a matter of someone's going to be willing to make that move happen.
Yeah, and they identify as an offensive team. And frankly, if you don't have Justin Jefferson, your offense ain't there. Madison hasn't been that great. Jordan Addison I really like, but that'll be interesting. Maybe we'll get more into that tomorrow. We got plenty more Blues conversation coming your way tomorrow, leading you up to a puck drop on Thursday night, which I will have 7 o'clock to 6 o'clock First Community pregame show. For Tanner Hendrickson, for Grant Francis filling in for BK, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll talk to you tomorrow at 11. Fastlane coming up.